Director of Business Development for Bright Pink Agency. I'm a USMC veteran, Titus Center for Franchising graduate, advisory board member, director of business development, which you just heard, entrepreneur, community builder, brand advocate, big brother, but most importantly, I'm a dog dad and I'm here and I love franchising, right? So I'm super honored to be here. We've got a great lineup and I'm just absolutely honored at the opportunity to be here with you all. So thank you so much for being here. I'm going to hit the next slide here. And this is a webinar brought to you by the CMO Peer Talks Community, of which I'm a new community manager. If you guys are not a part of the CMO community, Peer Talks community yet, go ahead and pull out your iPhone and or Android, depending on what kind of person you are, and go ahead and scan that barcode right there. Join our community. We have a wonderful, wonderful newsletter that goes out regularly, and we host events just like this where we bring in people from all around franchising to educate and it really empower franchise marketers to become fearless innovators. And we give out some awesome stuff at IFA events. So if you guys are going to be in FCXC in Atlanta, we're going to be hosting an event there. We'll be handing out some awesome books. And I did hear that we might have some socks as well. So the socks, if you don't have any from a previous event, are to die for. They're phenomenal socks that we like to give out. So welcome, Tatiana. Thanks for joining us. So I'm going to go ahead and give the mic over to Alex. Alex, could you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and Promo Republic?
Matthew, thank you so much for the warm introduction. Great to see so many familiar faces and new friends. Quick introduction to myself. My name is Alex Harbinyoff. I'm the local marketing expert here at Promo Republic, closely working with our franchise partners to really streamline their local marketing technology needs to ensure it's effective for both the brand plus franchisees. Next slide, please. Thank you. So a little bit about Promo Republic for those that are yet to get familiarized. Promo Republic is a data-driven platform which consolidates marketing tools, digital assets, data collection and analysis while bridging franchisee collaborative workflows all into one system. Supporting the franchise space since 2020, we're now helping over 80 franchise brands to generate more foot traffic and leads that have buying intent for their franchisees. Our ideal stack of tools is applicable for both established and emerging brands. If you're facing any challenges or are currently reviewing your MarTech vendors, let's connect for an introduction to Promo Republic and a consultation on how we can help you achieve those goals. I'll share my contact details in the chat below, and I look forward to getting familiar with everybody.
Thanks for that, Alex. So let's just jump right into the timetable for this event. So we have 5 super awesome sessions, and I'm not even sure if super awesome is proper English there, but the first one's going to be decoding franchise data from data mess to data yes, led by Raakkel Sims, who's the head of customer success and longtime CMO Peer Talks community member, Conway, Briscoe, Dan Monahagan, and I think that we might have an extra special guest on there, so we'll let him introduce himself when we get to that point. After that, we're going to roll into, is your tech stack helping or hurting your CX? Little big brand strategies, and then women in franchising is what we'll close out with. Excuse me, apologize about that. So without a further ado, let's just go ahead and roll right into the first session because we are jam-packed on time and I want to give everybody as much time as possible to speak to you all. I will be giving everybody a 5-minute warning. And with that said, here is the first session, decoding franchise data from data mess to data yes. Take it away, Raakkel.
Thanks so much, Matt. Hey, everybody. I'm excited to be back at another CMO Peer Talks event. Today is all about your franchise data and what to do with it and what you're already doing. We would love to make this as interactive as possible. So feel free to interact with the chat and let us know your thoughts on what we're talking about. You can share your experience if you're doing something or not. As Matt highlighted, I run our customer success department at Promo Republic, so it's my job to work with franchise partners day in and day out, and to really keep my ear to the ground on all of the emerging trends and changes that we're all seeing. And I know it's super rapid, especially in the marketing space in multi-location businesses. So I'm really excited to introduce our next host, Conway. Can you hear us? And is your microphone working, I guess, more importantly?
As far as I know, it's working. Is it working?
Fantastic. Yes, we hear you.
Awesome.
Would you like to introduce yourself to our team today?
Sure. My name is Conway Briscoe. I am, as you can see on the screen, the principal franchise solutions architect at Transitive. And at Transitive, we exist to guide franchisers through their unique data and analytics challenges. So yes, from data mess to data yes.
Love that. And our other panelist is Dan Moynihan from WSI. Dan, can you hear us, or are you with us?
I am with you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you so much. Would you like to introduce yourself to our amazing panel that we have here today?
Sure. So I'm the founder of WSI, a digital marketing agency that we've actually franchised. So we have franchised agencies around the world. That was about 30 years ago. And then in 2009, I founded Clear Summit Group, which is a platform company of 7 brands now, mostly in the service industry, including WSI, Qualicare, Tutor Doctor, some of you familiar with, and a handful of other service-based brands. So that's a little bit about me.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both, Dan and Conway, for being with us today. It should be a really vibrant conversation. So as for the agenda to follow along, we'll be covering the importance of being data-driven in franchising and reviewing the key indicators of what makes a truly data-driven franchise. Strategies for turning your marketing and operations into clear, actionable insights, and then effective ZOR and Z collaborations for the best data leverage. So really jam-packed. And like Matthew said, we're tight on time. So the first question I'm going to pose to the audience is, who has already implemented or is currently in the process of implementing a data-driven response? You can throw in a thumbs up emoji, raise your hands. We would love to see it. We're going to try and make today as interactive as possible. So let us know what you're doing. And as we see on the screen, we have our first question. So if you want to rate the effectiveness of your organization, maybe from 0 to 10 in the chat, feel free to do so. But our first question is all about mastering the data to pave the way for franchise success. So what signs show a franchisee is truly data-driven, and what does that look like? So Dan, maybe I'd pass the microphone to you to open this up, and especially with the robust organization that you have both with WSI and across your other brands, we'd love to learn from you.
Yeah, so I think how we speak about our operations and how we speak about our business model, the extent to which we speak about it in data terms. In other words, to what extent are all aspects of our business model data driven, and do we have benchmarks, and how valuable and useful are those benchmarks? So for example, some companies will use measures like cost per lead, which I think is a very misleading measure. So oftentimes I'll say, like, what, if I'm speaking to a franchisor, especially an early stage franchisor, what are the KPIs? How do you measure success in your digital marketing? And cost per lead, when that comes up, it's often, it's a misleading, it's just a bad piece of data. And the reason is because it's very easy to find cheap leads, but the real measure is what's your cost of sales. And what you find in general is that most businesses that are not data driven, they'll talk about cost per lead, but they don't really understand what their lifetime value of the customer is. They don't understand what their cost per client acquisition is. They don't understand their ROAS, their return on ad spend. So those are critical measures. And so, but then also looking at all the other areas of your operation. Is your customer service, do you have KPIs and data around that in terms of your NPS? Do you have speed? every business has a restrainer. We have different restrainers. For some businesses, marketing is your restrainer, how you bring new customers in the door. For other businesses, it's labor. How quickly can we get new staff onboarded to meet the client demand? For other clients, for other companies, it might be cost of sales, cost of labor. And so understanding what the restrainers are in your business, and then ensuring that you have metrics around those so that we know how our franchisees are doing in very quantitative ways, and have the ability to measure that. So I guess in answer to the question, it's, do we speak the language of data when we talk about our business, when we talk about our operations, and what success looks like? That's how I would indicate whether or not a company is data driven.
I think you hit a really important point there, in that there are different metrics to measure along different like marketing lines, whether that is in your ads or acquisition or in that customer service aspect, which I think a lot of brands either focus on one or the other without doing it holistically. And what's really interesting is that we see that data-driven organizations are 23 times more likely to acquire customers and 6 times more likely to retain customers, which all, as we know, leads to profit. So that, hits exactly, Dan, what you said about understanding that lifetime value and the return on ad spend that you're getting, and what is your cost per acquisition, which is often miscalculated or misfocused on, as you highlighted. Passing the microphone to Conway, what about, from your perspective within Transitive, how would you see the data-driven franchise?
We tend to talk about it in terms of where somebody is on their data journey. Like, are you aware that you have data? That would be like the very beginning of one's data journey.
Yeah.
And somewhere on the other side of the continuum, you have robust KPIs and reporting and dashboarding that's available to everybody all the time in real time. Most franchises are going to find themselves somewhere in between. So knowing where you are is half the battle. Like, can I access the data that's in the platforms that I'm using? And if I can, am I using that the way I really intend? Like Dan was saying, we can all look at cost per lead. That's going to mean something different from one business to another. And it may not even mean what you think it means. So how do we help people make sure they're accessing the data which is theirs in the ways that make the most impact on their business and on their team?
Yeah, and just to add to that, Conway, a lot of people don't realize that the most valuable asset they have in their business is not even on their balance sheet. We have goodwill, we have trademarks, we have inventory and things like that on our balance sheet, but what about our data? And this was true long before generative AI came along, which has now just magnified that. It's just 10x'd it. But when you think about what you can actually do with your data, whether that's through email nurturing campaigns in your franchise development or in your customer acquisition journey, but just understanding the value of that data and what that can mean to your business. And it's just further magnified with Gen AI, what we can do, mass personalization at scale, et cetera, with data.
Absolutely. And I think to bring both points together, to essentially summarize, I think it's what makes a really great data-driven franchisee, to combine both what Conway and Dan have highlighted. It's the consistent process of data utilization, whether you're just starting out your data journey and peeling back your numbers, or you're on the far end of the continuum where you have a lot of KPIs and dashboards, as Conway mentioned. So regularly checking data, analyzing it, and utilizing across the different levels and departments of the franchise, having maybe a tool or AI to rely on to help simplify that process, and to ultimately make decisions off of the data. So it's not, trial and error or guesswork, that it is something that is really going to bring you to that next level based on, an educated hypothesis, so to speak. And obviously, as Conway mentioned, having clear KPIs and having something that matters to the business, like Dan highlighted, because we can easily get lost in tracking wrong metrics. So it's really all about finding the metrics that help move the needle of the business further down the line. So really, really insightful. Moving on to the next question in today's panel, we have, what smart strategies can franchisors use to turn marketing, CX, operational data, chaos into clear, actionable decisions? So it's essentially taking the gray and making it black and white. Conway, would you like to lead us off on this one?
Sure. So let's just say that to keep working off of where Dan started earlier, let's say your cost of sales is whatever it is for your franchise, your business. Step one is knowing that. Step two is, what does it mean that it's at that level? And then the step beyond, to me, in making clear, actionable decisions is, if I increase my cost per sale, what happens? If I decrease my cost per sale, what happens? Where do I project my revenue? Where do I project my costs? What does that data point mean to me, both now and going forward? And you're only going to be able to get through the chaos if you're very clear about what you're measuring. Because there are a billion things to measure. And my own personal mantra that I try to live by is less is more. Find the one KPI that drives your business more than any other, and laser focus on it. And make sure that anybody that comes into contact with it knows what it means, both in their own individual business and for your business as a whole.
Yeah, I was speaking to a franchise CEO once, and she talked about what she calls TIFF, the important few. In one of our business, actually several of our businesses, we have what we call the fundamental four or the fundamental five. So you could ask any franchisee in the Tutor Doctor system, for example, what the fundamental four are. They know that the fundamental four is your cost per lead, your conversion rate of lead to consultation rate, your conversion rate of consultation rate to sale, and your average sale value. That's the fundamental four. If you add a fifth to it, it would be lifetime value. But you can ask any franchisee in the system, what are the fundamental four and what are the benchmarks of the fundamental four? And they will all know that. You can ask any staff member, they'll all know what the fundamental four is, because that's the foundation of the business model. And so in franchising, I've sometimes said, I highlight the fact that if you look at a company like McDonald's, the Big Mac, the Filet-O-Fish, the Quarter Pounder, the Happy Meal, Ronald McDonald, breakfast at McDonald's, these were all franchisee ideas. So if we begin with the premise that many of our best ideas will come from our franchisees, and that, the Peter Senge, he wrote a book called The Fifth Discipline, and in that book he said the only sustainable competitive advantage that companies have is the speed at which they learn. So if we take this concept that our best ideas in franchising will come from our franchisees, and that for us our competitive advantage as franchisors is the speed at which we learn compared to our competition, like how quickly are we learning? The next question is, how do we spot those learnings? How do we spot those opportunities? And so every business will have restrainers. And we just talked about that earlier, whether that's your labor cost, your client acquisition, et cetera. So what your restrainer is in your business. What are the benchmarks around that restrainer? And then how are we measuring that across our system? Because the best way to learn from our franchisees is to track their data and then look for the anomalies. We have this principle in our businesses we call Think Like Sherlock, where our home office team is always looking for anomalies, like your Sherlock, always looking for clues, because success leaves clues. So how is that franchisee getting an NPS rating that's 5 or 8 points above benchmark. How is that franchisee getting a labor cost that's 3% below benchmark? How is that franchisee getting a speed to service delivery ratio that's 9 hours faster than benchmark, right? So whatever your restrainer is, if you know what benchmark is, then you can look for all the anomalies in the system that exceed benchmark or are better than benchmark, and that's how we can learn. So instead of just putting our franchisees on stage at the annual convention because they're the highest performers, what about putting the ones on stage that have the highest net promoter score, or the ones that have the highest employee retention rate? And how are we learning from those people, and how are those learnings being shared across the network so that we can learn faster? And so I think the premise of wrapping data around all of your restrainers and then watching the network and benchmarking your franchisees is a really powerful principle. The one other thing I would say just on this topic of making actionable decisions, attribution from a marketing perspective is critical, and it's so often done incorrectly. So, for example, like, where did that lead come from? One of the worst. So often you'll hear, well, it was a homepage lead, or it came from organic. That is generally it's wrong. When people say, well, it's an organic lead, what do you mean an organic lead? Like, did we talk to the customer and find out how they heard about us? Just because they searched on Google doesn't make an organic lead. If they search for us on Google with our branded name, that's not using SEO. That's just Google doing their job. Your brand, even without SEO, is going to pretty much appear at the top if someone searches for it. So if we're not using proper attribution, we can make wrong decisions. So that, in terms of actionable decisions. So let me give you an example. Let's say you spend $2,000 a month on your SEO company. And so you spend $25,000 a year on SEO. And you get, let's say, let's say 4 franchise sales from SEO. And now you look at it and go, wow, our cost per sale with SEO is $6,000. Well, the reality is, if you really looked into those, you might find that 2 of them actually read about you in Entrepreneur Magazine and they searched your brand and they landed on your site. Somebody else heard about it through another franchisee who said, I love this business, I want to join. And maybe one was from organic search because someone was searching for your industry and your brand. But instead, what happens is that the decision is made, wow, SEO is really working for us. Let's double our budget with the SEO company. Now, we're in the SEO business, so I'm kind of like undermining, I'm telling you, you got to hold companies like us accountable, because just because you're getting leads through your homepage through Google doesn't mean they're SEO. And so we can make a wrong decision by doubling our SEO budget because we don't have proper data on attribution. So, and there's all kinds of examples where we can make wrong decisions if we have wrong data, but that's just a mistake that a lot of companies make.
Really well said, both Dan and Conway. I think the important pieces to remember is, as you've said, to collect and organize data from various sources into one place to ensure consistency and accuracy, and to benchmark that data across the network, where you can see how the franchisees are operating against each other, and to have leaderboards and evolve that data tracking, and also to make sure that you are measuring the right KPIs for your organization. And, I really do think there's a lot of data noise that is out there. There's so many data sources. Dan's only listed a few, but what you really need to do is focus on what matters to you, as Conway said. So whether that is, having one KPI that's the driver across the organization, or having your core 4, as Dan said, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just making sure that you have are collecting that data consistently, having one place where it's populated and are able to track it long-term across the location's performance, and to really evolve that customer experience, have those touch points, and bring that back all the way to consumer feedback and to have what they say. So Dan, you really did a great job of highlighting that entire narrative in one place. And same for you, Conway, really, really well highlighted. I think data literacy is that one piece that can be really tricky, but if we're training everyone on what to look at and at least at what key metric that matters for everyone, it should be a great way to make all team members effective in ensuring that they understand how to interpret and use the data effectively to move, that the next phase of the data and KPIs that you're looking for. All right.
Can I add something before we go to the next one?
Definitely.
I've been in some of these meetings before, especially when I was in the beginning of franchising time, where I'd be sitting in these meetings and people would be saying, and it's this, 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 and it's this. And I would be the one sitting there going, I don't have access to this, 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 and this yet. So what I just want to add is, wherever you are in the data journey, wherever it is, you're fine. Just take the next step in seeing more of your data, in centralizing more of it so you can access it, so that your company can take action on the data. If you don't have it all in place, you're not alone. That's just what I wanted to throw in there.
I think that's really well said. It's, we're talking about concepts at a high level, but if you're just starting out the journey, do not be afraid, Conway. I think that's a really important point, that nobody here should feel that they're behind the 8 ball on anything. We want to make sure that we're giving you the tools to start having these questions and to start thinking about, okay, what is my North Star metric that I want to move my organization to? And if you have more questions, we are, all here. I know our speakers are really helpful, eager to connect, and, we all, our team members, always have time to answer questions. So I think, Conway, that was really an important point to highlight. On to one of our last questions here, which is, how do Zors and Zs collaborate effectively to leverage the data? And what tools or technologies do you have in place to help them do it? Dan, would you like to kick us off here?
Sure. So I think the whole essence of franchising is about collaboration, right? And the fact that many of the best ideas, in fact, the vast majority of the best ideas are outside the building. In franchising, we often, and you'll see this on your team, is often thinking like life would be better or be so much easier if franchisees would just listen and follow direction. And yet the reality is, in many cases, the franchisees know more about the customer and know more about how the market is changing than we do. And so the question is, how are we collaborating with them? How are we listening and learning from them? So whenever we're implementing new ideas, we want to avoid this ivory tower mindset where, we've cooked this up at the head office and now we're going to just launch it. We always want to begin with a pilot. And that pilot always involves data. It always involves, like, how do we measure success? How do we know that this pilot is successful? And so a high level of collaboration is important with franchisees in that process. What we often find, especially in marketing pilots, is that the data can be misleading because, so let me give you an example. You're running a new advertising and marketing campaign, and so the leads are coming in, you've got a cost per lead, you're measuring, and then but it's not materializing into sales. And so now you say, well, the cost per lead is good, but the cost of customer acquisition is bad, or the cost of revenue is bad. But are you actually listening to those calls? And so we deeply engage into in the collaboration piece. We're listening to those phone calls. And lo and behold, we find out the phone's not getting answered. Or the phone is being answered, but it's being really managed poorly. Or the dog's barking in the background. or the person didn't close correctly or follow the 7-step process. And so oftentimes you find that the restrainers are operational and not actually marketing, but you don't know that unless you're collaborating deeply with them, listening and learning at what's going on deeper into the process. So I would say that's a critical part of it, is going deep on your pilots and learning from the franchisees. I often talk about 3 legs of a stool. You've got people, you've got process, you've got leads, right? So on the front end of the sales process, when we're bringing new customers on, you got leads, you got a people, and you got a process, and that's all tied together with technology. So technology allows us to measure which parts of those is broken. Is it the people? Is it the process? Or is it the actual marketing, the leads themselves? So anyhow, all that's important when it comes to collaboration.
So that second question there about what technology will help you do it, the answer is there are many technologies that can help you do it. But there are some things I think everybody should keep in mind when you're both trying to maximize your current technology and you're vetting other platforms you might want to use. A big one is, what's your access to your own data? Can you get out of the technology you're using what you need to make the decisions you need to make? Can you get to a granular level like Dan was just talking about? Can I get down to where it's actually happening and be able to assess what's causing that restrainer, that issue that's keeping me from working the way I need to? Another aspect is really more the first question. I think it's incumbent on franchisors to prove out the value of quality data entry by a franchisee and how it turns into a great return on investment of marketing dollars. To use Dan's option from before about attribution, if you're not doing attribution correctly, you're probably spending money in the wrong categories. But the only way to know that is if you start doing attribution correctly and entering those things into a CRM or other platform that you're using, and you can get that back out of it to bounce it against your financial data to know where you're getting the most bang for your buck. So to me, both of those really go together. You need both. You need data quality from the entire network, and you need access to your data to be able to make decisions.
Yeah, that's a great point, Conway. And I would just, one point to definitely take away is that what most people don't realize today is that the value of their first party data is going to explode exponentially with AI. So what you can do with the data in your CRM and how you can do, mass personalization at scale in the not too distant future is going to be really significant. So capturing all that source data, that first party data, in the CRM is going to pay dividends for you in the future.
Absolutely. I fully agree with that. And I think this is a really exciting space because we do have so many different avenues of technology emerging as we go with AI and with different platforms to help Zords and Zs alike really understand the data and the metrics. And I think just to bring this full circle, I think highlighting the regular communication with franchisees and making sure that they understand what metrics matter to the business and how they can grow, as well as at the Zor level, utilizing these platforms that do enable you to have the dual view can be really helpful to share that data in real time. And to have joint analytics, projects, processes, and to really take on what Dan highlighted about focusing on the franchisee, their ideas, and how to help them grow will really enable you to get the right tools, like Conway said, and to make sure that you're auditing and piloting and testing everything that is out there. So that highlights, the different technologies that you have, whether you're leveraging business intelligence tool like Tableau or Microsoft Power BI to visualize and generate these insights, or you have marketing automation platforms like Conway highlighted, or you're using AI and testing out new emerging trends that are out there. I think there's so many ways to do it that it's absolutely fantastic to sort through that to see if, as Conway highlighted, what data do you have access to, what metrics matter to you, and how you can get that message across the whole network. So it's really taking that and making it actionable like we've highlighted before.
I love that wrap up, Raakkel. Thank you so much. This has been an absolutely amazing panel. We do have about 5 minutes, so please, for the guests in the audience, go ahead, grab some coffee, some quick water, or if you want to stick around through the 5 minutes, if it's okay with the panel, I think it'd be a good time for some questions. If anybody has some, go ahead and unmute yourself at this time. And we'll sit here awkwardly until somebody asks at least one question. So.
Feel free to
Thank you for that.
unmute yourself if you have a question, or you can throw it in the channel. Both Conway and Dan are great minds, so this is an amazing time to pick their brains.
Hey guys, it's Tim Tang with Hughes. I was wondering if you could maybe just share in your experiences kind of where the low-hanging fruit is, where a lot of franchisees are just getting started in many cases. When you talked about the what was it, the fundamental 5 and the likes. In your experience, kind of if they could only do one thing or needed a starting point, where would you start?
From my perspective, I would start with NPS, right? The Net Promoter Score, assuming they don't have anything, because, so integral with the brand is the customer, right? And it all begins with the customer. So we can learn a lot by those franchisees that are delighting the customers. And, that old Peter Drucker quote that we can't manage what we can't measure. This really gives us the ability to learn faster when we can see who is delighting the customer.
I would say almost anything beyond the standard stuff people tend to focus on. Like, I think what happens most of the time at a franchise event is the one who sells the most is the one who gets recognized. Wouldn't it be fun if the one who got recognized was the one who had the most net profit at the end? There's all kinds of data points you can access. So what are the ones in your particular business, and yours is a particular business, whoever you are, that really drive things forward? And I think you'll find it's not always gross sales.
I couldn't agree more with you, Conway. I think, those are some amazing points. It brings to mind this conversation. We do have about 5 minutes here. So for anybody who just joined or is still in the audience, please feel free to step away for a second. We do have an amazing panel coming up in about 5 minutes. But on attribution, sometimes I think as we get to the end of a sale, right, and we actually get money into the bank, at some point, it's really easy for that data to get lost along that journey. So how can we as business leaders or business owners do something about like that transition, right? From marketing to a lead to a sale to then money in the bank, and properly attribute that? At what point? I think it's like the last mile. It's a last mile question, right? What's something super tactile and effective as a business leader or entrepreneur that we can do to help make sure we don't lose that little pivotal piece of attribution data?
It's a really, really important point, Matt. And I'm always surprised by the number of companies or business leaders who actually, there is this big gap between your marketing system and your CRM. And you can, through Google Analytics, and there's various tools, through using UTMs, you can do that through, tagging something in your marketing with a UTM through to your CRM. But let me give you an example. In Tutor Doctor, we not only know what our cost per lead is or cost of sales are through Google PPC, but we can tell you which keywords are producing the highest revenue. So for example, I can tell you that the keyword physics tutor produces significantly more revenue than English tutor or French tutor. Now most of our competitors, and don't go telling any of our competitors, but most of our competitors don't know that. And so we're able to spend a lot more to acquire a physics tutor customer than they are, because they're looking at numbers like cost per lead, or even if they're sophisticated, they're looking at cost of sales from Google AdWords, but they don't know cost per keyword against revenue. And so the lifetime value of a customer who searches for physics tutor is going to be much higher. So all that to say, do you have that granularity around your attribution? And if not, just talk to your technical people or your marketing agency or whatever and say, like, I need this as a business leader. We don't have this and I need it. So anyhow, that's a great point, Matt. Bridging your marketing system through to your CRM is critical.
For me, there's another piece to it. We've talked about it, but we haven't named it this way. It's process. It's making sure that you have processes in place in your organization that take things from one part of your business to another. And those processes are known and followed by everybody in your business. That's going to sound ridiculously like the data journey I just described. That's because it is. So you can have processes, having them down and followed by everybody is another level. And then having them even known beyond your interior team to actually your customers goes even beyond that. That to me is how you bring all this together as well.
I love it. I'm gonna print it out. I'm gonna put it on a shirt. Process, right? And on the front, it's gonna say attribution. So that way you get both sides of this story here. So it's 12:45 now. I hope everybody made it back from whatever it is that you're doing. If you guys have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to any of our guest speakers or our host. And if you can't get in touch with them, get in touch with me and I will get you in touch with them. Unless, of course, you're trying to sell them something, because then I have to ask them if I can put you in touch first. But anyway, so let's move on to the next point here. And this is just highlighting that Promo Republic is, of course, one of those really awesome data tools that helps to bring all the data together. And if you missed Alex in the beginning of this presentation, if you reach out to him, he'll be reaching out to every single one of you. At the end, he can explain how Promo Republic can support you on your data journey. We already did this. I skipped ahead. And here is these contact links. So I'll give everybody in a couple of seconds here if you want to pull out your phone and scan those guys, or not. You know, it's a little awkward because everybody's mics are muted, but I hope somebody is taking advantage of this. Awesome. Thanks again, guys. It's been an awesome panel. We're rolling right into the next one. So from 12:45 to 1:45, is your tech stack helping or hurting your customer experience? So leading the charge here is Kasey Skala. Kasey, if you're in the audience right now, could you please go ahead and unmute your mic? Same with the other speakers, John and Erich. Are you with us, Kasey?
I'm here, yes.
Awesome. Nice to see you here. Thank you so much for joining us. So for those in the audience who don't know who Kasey is, which I don't know how that's possible, but things happen. Kasey is a seasoned marketer with over 15 years of experience, having worked in global marketing roles for brands like Solo Cup. Maybe you've heard the song by, Red Solo Cup, Virgin Mobile, and Great Clips. Kasey brings a wealth of expertise in both business to business and business to consumer marketing strategies. Kasey, take it away. I'll be your man in the chair and hit the button for you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Matthew, for the introduction. And hello, everybody. Looking forward to this. It's going to be a great one where we're bringing marketing and technology together, an ever increasing partnership between the two departments. So let's kick off with our two esteemed guests. The first one is Erich Johnston from Empower Brands. Erich, if you want to give a quick overview background of yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Kasey. So I'm the Franchise Technology Solutions Manager here at Empower Brands. We are a franchisor with 10 different brands. 8 of those are home services concepts. The other 2 are B2B. My team is responsible for basically helping those new investors with everything from the time they license their territory to the time they divest their business. So anything that's technology related, my team's here to support them along the way.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Erich. And then Matthew, if you could go to the next slide here. The next one, I love this one. This guy's a rock star, literally a rock star, it looks like. John Keene from ServiceMinder. Thanks for joining us, John. If you want to give a overview of your background and then what kind of guitar you play there.
That happens to be a Paul Reed Smith Swamp Ash Special 25th edition. But I'm only a rock star if you qualify being able to cover my bar tab. So luckily I spend more of my time on the software side. So ServiceMinder is a platform for managing operating home services brands. And so that's kind of the whole, from the lead coming in until the royalties get paid in the back end, right? We kind of facilitate that whole process, allow brands to manage and instrument and report on all of that data, as well as enforcing consistency. And then a big part of what we do, obviously, is help our franchisees and the brands also support, their client experience needs for their clients. So that's kind of what we do. We've been at it since 2012. So we almost got it figured out.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So let's take a look at the agenda here. Again, this ever increasing partnership between the marketing CMO role and the CTO role continues to grow and grow. And brands that are able to leverage that partnership are the brands that are succeeding and are going to succeed in the future. So we have a great agenda here around managing and building out that customer experience, that journey for your customer, and how tech stack can impact, or more importantly, how it can hurt that experience. So here are the 5 topics that we'll dive into. I won't read over them here. We'll dive into them in depth here. So let's kick it off, and we'll kick it off with Erich, since I introduced you first. Erich, this first topic is talking about how we can identify whether or not our brand's customer experience is succeeding, or if there are enhancements that we need to be making. So, what do you look at in your organization around whether or not that customer experience is a positive experience for your customers and prospects? Or more importantly, how do you know that there needs to be changes or enhancements?
So I'll go back to the last session. I know Dan had brought up the importance of working with your franchisees, making sure that there's a revolving door of communication back and forth. A lot of times those guys are going to raise the red flags when something's wrong, or they're going to tell you when something's going really well. So just stay in communication with the franchisees when you're making those decisions. From a day-to-day, we track some KPIs for all the brands here. The big ones for us are speed to lead. So how quickly are we getting to our new leads? Lead to appointment ratios. So of those leads, who are we qualifying and actually booking appointments with? Appointment to sale. So once we get on site, how are we doing to close sales? And then we start looking at things like customer retention, lifetime value, client churn rates. So if they're canceling service with us, why? Are they going to another provider? Why? And then for some of our more like project-based brands that are not so service-based, we dig more into the customer journey and the sales funnel just to kind of determine what's going well, where things might be bogging down in the process, and where the opportunities to improve are.
Erich, you have a portfolio of brands, and I'm assuming that your franchisee base is pretty wide, from new, startup, maybe smaller from a revenue perspective, to the opposite, where they're mature, larger revenue, larger teams. How do you manage, when you're either introducing a new technology or a new platform, or, you're looking at upgrades? How do you manage sort of accommodating that breadth of experience, we'll call it, from your brands and your franchisees, across a single brand, but then across your portfolio brands? What's that process look like?
So in addition to having, within the same brand, we've got folks who have been in business for 30 years. We've also got brands that have been around for 35 years and some brands that have been around for 6 months. So the conversation's a little bit different depending on the audience you're talking with. But for those well-established brands, we try and get folks from all walks of that kind of tenure. So we've got our experienced guys that are doing really well. They're helping the middle guys kind of figure out how to get over that hump. And then everybody's geared towards the new guys. How do we get the brand new franchisees ramped up so that they're contributing to the brand the same way that our other locations are? So I think our experienced guys, for the most part, they've got it figured out. They've helped us figure it out, and they have a really good eye towards what does a new franchisee need to succeed in this model. So we really rely on them.
Perfect. John, what's your feedback? What's your viewpoint on ensuring that technology is running smoothly, it's bringing efficiencies, it's helping grow the business, and then what are some early indicators that you may need to pivot or evolve a little bit?
Yeah, one of the big things we talk about from a client experience perspective is every brand at a base, but also just even within every industry, the client experience that the consumers are expecting is completely different, right? Especially if you're B2B versus B2C. But even within the B2C space, if you're kind of on the retail side, right, that client experience is going to look very different than if you're coming to somebody's home to perform some kind of service, right? If you need to go inside. And so, we tend to, obviously we focus on the home services side. And so what we try to focus on is what does that consumer expect, right? And to a certain extent, it's almost like you want to tell them what you're going to tell them what you told them, tell them, and then repeat. You can almost not communicate too much to the consumer so they know what to expect. And so then if you kind of follow that model, then where does your tech stack help you or hurt you, right? Does it enable all those communication touch points that you want to do? Are there new touch points that you want to add or enable? And does your technology solution allow you to do that? Some of the red flags to look for early on is obviously adoption, right? Are people using the tool? Are they turning it on? Are they letting it do its thing? But then secondly, how much manual process does it take to get things done? Like what's the recipe for a franchisee or someone who works for the franchisee to turn that part of the crank, right? If it involves them manually placing outbound phone calls or going over to a texting solution or, kind of manually copying and pasting data from one thing to another, then those are all things to look at in terms of, eliminating that friction, eliminating that manual process, because anytime you introduce that, that's where the adoption goes down. People will just not do it because they don't have time. So automation is definitely a big part of enhancing, and then manual effort is definitely something that can be a detriment.
You mentioned something there I think is interesting, and you talked about kind of the customers' expectations. So I'll throw this back to you, John, and then also I'd like Erich's feedback on this. How do you balance the customer feedback and the customer expectations versus franchisee feedback and expectations on how they may think or feel they want the process or experience to be? How do you balance those two things?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, part of it goes back to, it's a franchise. So to a certain extent, the client experience, will oftentimes be kind of, I don't want to say dictated or mandated, right? But is at least designed by the brand to be consistent, right? Because if you walk into, franchisee A and go through their client experience versus franchisee B, as a consumer, you're expecting those to be consistent, right? So if they're vastly different, then in that case, I think maybe the brand wins and the franchisee doesn't win as much, right? But in terms of balancing what the client's looking for, I mean, you really have to look at, I would say to franchisees, like, what if you're the consumer of your service? What would you want, right? Would you want to know they're coming tomorrow? And would you like a time frame? Would you like to know that they're on the way? Would you like, a place to leave some feedback or whatever, right? If you as a consumer expect that for your other vendors, then your customers probably want the same thing from you.
Erich, any feedback, anything from your end on that?
And I think it kind of leads into the next discussion point here on the agenda, but know who your clients are. So, I mean, we have our idea of who the clients are at the franchisor level. Our franchisees are close to their clients and they know what it's like in their market. But invest in some market research, figure out what your client personas are out there, who's actually buying from you guys. And yeah, take everybody's input correctly and then talk about that together, make sure that they're all aligned.
Yeah, that is a very interesting. I remember when I was at Great Clips and we were launching our online check-in app. I had the marketing folks and me sitting on the marketing side of it. It was a kind of a difficult position to be in, where franchisees and our marketing team was like, "Oh, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this," right? And I had to go back to them and say, "Remember what our original intent with this was. If we start adding functionality off the get-go, right, we're not going to achieve what the goal of this is. Let's build it, let's launch it, and then enhance it from there." But initially, it's not a marketing tool for us today. So, John, we'll go back to you. What is that magic formula? I think if we have the magic formula, I think we'd all be wealthy and retired on a beach somewhere. But
we wouldn't be having this call.
Yeah. What are some of those elements of building from success and ensuring that you have, whether it's in building out the roadmap and the go-to-market strategy, or the enhancement, updating functionality of a tech stack?
Yeah, I think Erich kind of touched on this a couple of times, and that is it's kind of know your customer, right? Whether the customer is the franchisee or the customer is the clients of the franchisees. You have to start with kind of what is the expectations at both of those levels. And then once you have that, then you want to go and evaluate, how well are you able to execute on those expectations, right? So if it's a communication strategy or a reporting strategy or an analytics solution or whatever, do you have are you capturing the data you need to be able to do that? And then B, do you have the technology to execute it? For example, if your process is going to use text messaging to notify customers, do you have the ability to text or not? And so as you kind of run through those and make sure you have the things, then that's probably step 2. And then the third piece of that is part of the formula is, again, to kind of measure, right? So measure engagement, measure utilization, measure what consumers or the clients do with those interactions. Do they respond? Are those within?
He froze there.
Erich first and go back.
All right, perfect. Erich, when you're looking at whether or not your tech stack's bringing the efficiency and the growth and the value that you're looking to achieve, how do you define what that success is? And then again, how do you ensure with the breadth of the brands and the breadth of the stakeholders that you remain true to that original intent, so you do set yourself up for success?
Yeah, I think when you're picking the tools that you guys are going to implement across the franchise system, is make sure it's something that you can keep consistent. You don't need people going off into left field and selling a Whopper when we're slinging Big Macs, right? So that piece of it's important to us. Knowing that you're tracking the data and that you're able to have that data output on the other side so you guys can monitor the success of things is important to us as well. But just knowing where you're at today with your current client experience and the customer journey. So at least once every other year with each brand, we like to kind of map that out, whether it's in a big room with all the franchisees together on poster boards, or if it's in a smaller group like a advisory council. It's kind of walk through the customer journey and all the automations and all the manual intervention that we have out there. Once we kind of understand where we're at today with something, we can start attributing some emotions that we'll put those on the client. But when you get to this point, maybe they're starting to feel a little nervous about making a decision. What can we do to inject a new tool or a new process into that client journey when they start to have the negative emotions? How can that kind of help us define what the enhancements need to be to the tech stack?
When you do you have, Erich, do you guys have a technology board, an innovation committee, or anything like that with your franchisees of, again, pushing it back on them, right? Because, from the franchisor standpoint, right, we can talk about anything that we want to talk about, but it's a lot more impactful when it's coming from a franchisee to a franchisee. So do you guys have a technology committee or an innovation committee or anything that you guys lean on? Or is that always driven from the franchisor perspective?
So we do, and we it's less of a committee, a standing committee, and more of a task force where we have our advisory councils who are, the 7 or 8 franchisees that have been voted in by their peers and by the brand team. We kind of let the issues bubble up and get filtered out through that group. And then once the brand team, the FAC is aligned on what the priorities are, then we'll kick off a specific task force to go and solve that issue. So just for us, it's been more productive to kind of hyper focus on those meetings, set a deadline, set a goal, and work through it that way, as opposed to just have this open-ended task force that meets every other month and talks about whatever's kind of hot button.
Okay, perfect. Let's go to the next slide, Matthew, here. So the $1 million question, what does success look like, right? I think, everybody would agree that we can measure whatever we want to measure. The amount of data that we can collect is pretty vast. But how do we know that we're measuring the right thing? And then how do we communicate that success? So Erich, we'll turn it back to you and then go over to John. And again, it's a broad question, but how are you looking at success and how are you defining success right now?
Success is we're making a lot of money, right? Right. We have people buying into the brand. People are selling their businesses for a good return on their investment over their tenure of the business. But really, looking back to see the success of the tools are they being adopted, right? So what's the utilization of those tools? Are we overcomplicating things, or maybe we just missed the mark on what we were trying to solve and how we were solving it? Yeah, and then just the regular KPIs that we're tracking, making sure everybody knows what the data points going into a profile are and how that's going to be used on the back end, so we can monitor success of new initiatives, figure out what the baseline is and what kind of growth we're expecting to see or kind of metrics we want to see on the other end.
How do you balance that success with the customer experience? So, let's say there's an existing technology in place that, again, is driving, the desired results, at least from the franchisor's viewpoint, but you have feedback from the franchisees of, hey, we need to add this, we need to pivot here, we need to bring in this. How do you kind of balance those two potential counterpoints?
So a lot of times we'll take, an idea from the franchise system or even from somebody here at the franchisor side and, create a pilot group, a smaller focus group that you can implement out there and see if you're getting traction on that side of things before you decide to, upend somebody's season with this new initiative when they're in the middle of summer and their busy season. So we always try and roll out new initiatives for the brand when things are slowing down. A lot of our, home services businesses are very seasonal. So between November and February is like our time to actually implement, train, get some feedback, get stuff rolled back out. And then once we get into March, kind of people stop engaging with the newer initiatives that are out there in the system and they just want to run their business and get through the day. And then next fall, we'll talk about it again.
Perfect. John, your brand there, right? Are people showing up? Are they doing the job? Are they getting paid? Is the communication working? On the surface, it might sound pretty straightforward on what, the metrics of success would be for ServiceMinder, but, how do you, define and communicate what success looks like on your end?
Yeah, I think what we try to communicate to franchisors and franchisees as well is one of the key things to measure is, are the franchisees making more money as well, right? So you need to not only deal with top line revenue, right? Are their revenues growing? That obviously has an indirect effect for the brand because that drives royalties for most brands. But step one is, are the tools helping the franchisees, produce more revenue? And then the second side of the equation is it helping them, operate more efficiently, right? Are they making more money, right? And a lot of times franchisees almost care more about that than the top line. But the key metrics there have to drive, is the product cost effective versus the solution cost effective? You know, if it introduces a bunch of manual effort, then that's expensive, right? So you have to kind of balance, does it help eliminate manual effort for something they did before, or does it help them do something that they have to do more efficiently, or does it help drive top line revenue? You know, and if it does those things for the franchisees, then as long as it meets the brand's requirements as well, then I think you have you can call it a success.
You know, with, again, you know, the difference between a, you know, new beginning franchisee or a franchisor, or a young franchisor, John, in your instance, versus, you know, mature franchisee, franchisor model, you know, is there any, you know, difference or variation, at least in the beginning and the onboarding, that you see of, yeah, we want to drive top line revenue for the organization. Let's not maybe focus on profitability today. You know, we got to get there. We got to walk before we run. How do you manage those sort of expectations? And how do you, you know, define success for the variance of, you know, the maturity of the brand itself?
Yeah, I think, you know, brands that are just getting started, or even franchisees that are just getting started, you know, there's almost a limitless palette of choices of things to go do. And so I think for the early ones that are getting started, you want to focus on the core things, right? You know, get new leads, you know, book appointments, you know, generate invoicing, so that you can kind of test out those core processes. And once, you know, franchisees, especially new franchisees, can only learn so many things at once, right? They can't learn the entire brand top to bottom in the first 6 months. So, you know, especially when you're onboarding new franchisees, the technology may have a lot more capabilities to do things that maybe you don't show them early on, right? So that they can focus on the core things, right? So whatever those core business functions are, like, you know, kind of the basics of the factory, right? Like leads come in, money comes in at the end, right? And then as they become more mature and more familiar with both the business processes and just the franchise system in general, then you can start adding on these new things. And then the last piece then is, as they get more mature in their space, they're then able to do more peer group stuff, right? They're able to work with other franchisees to find out what they're doing to help them. And I think that's a key market dynamic on the franchise side, where you know, don't underestimate the value of asking your peers how they're using the tool and how it's helping them. And obviously the brand is doing that as well, but maybe with a different lens, right? So those are all ways to kind of measure the overall success and speed up the startup process, right? Don't walk in on day one and say, okay, great, it's an automated business, let's automate everything, and then we'll go home on Monday at 5, right? It's you know, it's start small and add on as your competencies grow.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Matthew, let's go to the next question here. We're getting close to the end here. Best practices. John, you mentioned a little bit about that peer performance, peer groups. You know, how would you, if you had to, you know, list, you know, top 2 or 3, you know, best practices, you know, what does that look like from your end? And then what value do you see in comparing your brand to another brand, either within the space or within a different vertical?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, just because we're a platform that tries to automate things, a big part of what we talk about is, you know, the benefits of automation, right? Which is to eliminate manual processes, right? So one of your best practices for evaluating your current technology stack is looking at, you know, all that manual effort and friction, right? So how many man hours a week do you burn, you know, downloading stuff in Excel, uploading it somewhere else, versus if the tool could do a thing and you had a checkbox for it or whatever, right? That just happens automatically. How many steps in your process do you have to hand off to somebody else to go do? So that's usually one of the first things we look at from a kind of a measurement perspective. Because again, if it's manual, then either A, somebody's not going to show up one day, or B, they're going to forget the step, or they're going to fall behind. And so the process is going to break down because it requires, you know, people to do specific things. You want to try to enable automation as much as possible, to eliminate those faults.
Wonderful, thank you. Erich, you know, what would be, you know, if you had to pick out 2 or 3 kind of key points or recommendations to other franchisees in the space to bring efficiency and successful technology into an organization, what are some of those best practices that you would recommend to others?
Definitely having a peer group, like John said. Empower Brands being the company that it is, we've got those 8 residential brands that are pretty well represented across the major markets. We try and connect those owners up front, right? So an owner of Architect who's been in business for 15 years is now getting a new Wallaby location that's opening down the street from them, making sure that they're starting to build those relationships up front. And not just with the other Empower Brand sister companies, but the folks that are in those BNI networks as well, just kind of working with the existing locations.
Perfect. And then last question here, and Matthew and Dario, we're going to run a little bit over, but I trust that you'll give me 1 or 2 more minutes here. How do we know if what we're doing is if we're maximizing what we need to be doing, or if we need to be kind of digging a little deeper? Erich, we'll kick off with you for this one. And then again, it'd be great if you had any hurdles that you experience with your multiple brands there. But how do you know if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, or if, hey, we need to get a little bit deeper and a little bit more tighter on some of our actions?
Yeah. So we get, pretty bogged down in the minutia of whatever initiative or customer journey or client experience is for the brand. So it's nice for us every month we have a, confirmation day, discovery day, E-day, where I get to sit in a room and kind of talk through with a brand new set of eyes what the customer journey looks like, what the main data points are, what kind of reporting we're looking at on the back end of things. So it's nice to see the reaction of somebody across the table who's heard nothing about the brand. And if they're able to follow along with me and ask some engaging questions, to me, that means like, all right, it's clicking, we're on the right path here. On the other side of things, the red flags for us is engagement, right? So if it's not resonating with our owners or their teams, then we've either missed the mark on what we're trying to solve and how we're solving it. Maybe we've overcomplicated the solution, or we've just failed to get the proper input and buy-in from our advisory councils and our franchisees.
Wonderful. John, on your end, when you're implementing some of your platform within some of these brands, is simple bad? Is sometimes, making it basic and simple okay? And then, how do you know if you are kind of overstepping sort of that comfort efficiency standpoint when you're bringing on applications and functionality into the platform?
Yeah, simple is good as long as you're able to do what you need to do, right? You kind of want the simplest thing that does what you want to do, but also don't forget that there are things you may want to do later. You want to make sure you're not kind of boxed in and don't have any room for growth. So from a user experience, from a process perspective, you want it simple, but from a kind of a tooling perspective, you want kind of a rich technology base to draw from so that you can kind of solve problems you haven't thought about. One of the things I would kind of highlight in terms of the overall process to implement technology, is we've said a lot of things here, and a lot of it sounds pretty basic. You just have a group, you have a meeting, you make a decision, and then it just magically happens. There's a lot of work that goes into rolling out, big systems. You have to deal with data migrations, or if you're rolling out a new communications strategy, somebody has to go design all those messages, all those communications, right? So what are you going to send to consumers? What is it going to say? Never underestimate and don't under budget the amount of time it takes to kind of go through all of those steps in the client experience, because somebody's going to have to look at every single one of those to decide, we want it to say this or we want it to say that. Is this on brand or is this off brand? And those are all things that I think people kind of inherently, when they get excited about moving forward, kind of overlook some of the effort that's required for some of those things. So that's kind of my red flag is if you think it's going to go super easy, make sure you think through the whole steps and what all you have to do to make it roll out.
Perfect. Last question here before I turn it back over to Matthew to do his thing here. Since, CMO Peer Talks, a lot of marketers, in the group and on the call here. John and Erich, if you had one piece of advice of a marketer working with technology to make sure that relationship is impactful, what would that be? John, we'll start with you.
I would say focus on kind of the data journey, right? So you want it to kind of flow as seamlessly as possible from, that first ad impression or that first direct mail postcard or from that first, phone call or coupon interaction all the way through to the end result, which is, revenue to the bottom line. You want to be able to kind of trace and audit that all the way through to verify that you can measure the levers and make the changes that you want to make.
Perfect. Wonderful. Erich?
Yeah, I would echo that. Same. Make sure, as a marketer, you're working with your your tech folk, your vendors out there in the world. They understand what the output is you're looking for, so you can monitor these things, making sure that the data is flowing through correctly, so you have that on the back end.
Wonderful. Well, this has been great. Matthew, I'll turn it back over to you. I don't know if we have time or questions coming in, or if you want to say anything to wrap it up here.
No, the main thing I want to say to you gentlemen is thank you. I hope that everybody in the audience enjoyed it. If you guys did have any questions, we do have the next session bumped right up to here. So I just ask that you guys go ahead and scan to get in contact with any of these fine gentlemen. It was I have tons of notes and I'm going to be digesting for a while here. One thought on what John was saying with always planning, if you're going to implement a system, the devil's always in the details with those things. So I couldn't agree more with what he said with that. And, I hope that everybody got as much value as I did from it. So with that said, Professor Hayes, if you're in the audience, go ahead and unmute yourself, and Aaron Harper, do the same. I'm about to roll into your guys' session, which is going to be Real World Stories, Leader Talk, and Q&A with Aaron Harper, and it's led by Dr. John Hayes. So if any of you in the audience are unfamiliar with Dr. John Hayes, he's an internationally recognized speaker, a business coach, and Amazon bestseller. He helps franchisors and franchisees reduce costs and increase profit with 40 plus years of experience as in franchising. Some of you guys might be familiar with the brand Homevestors or We Buy Ugly Houses. And more importantly than that, Dr. Hayes is educating the next franchise generation, which I'm proud to be a part of. And he is my professor from the Titus Center of Franchising and leads the advisory board there. So with that said, take it away, Professor, and I will be your chairman.
Well, thank you, Matthew. And hello, everyone. I see lots of familiar faces. I like seeing a lot of our advisory board members. And it always, it's almost overwhelming to have students in an audience, or graduates in the case of the two who are on here. It's always, it jolts me for a second to realize I helped that young person or those young people get into franchising. I hope that's a good thing. I think it is. It certainly has been for me. So there's Aaron. Hello, Aaron.
Hi.
We're going to do a little bit of a founder story with Aaron Harper. So, Aaron, nobody, when you're a kid, unless your father is a founder of a franchise company or something similar, nobody says, when I grow up, I'm going to be a franchisor. Most people in America have no clue what that means. Most people in America have no clue what franchising means, which is why it's so important to be educating young people about franchising and helping them into the 350 some industries that make up franchising. So nobody ever says that. And I'm assuming, Aaron, you didn't say that. What'd you want to be when you were growing up?
When I graduated college, I wanted to be a talent agent in Hollywood.
You would have been a good talent agent. I can see that.
Thank you.
You've got that, the combination on the disc scale of the D and the I, the driver and the influencer, which I think most founders have that combination anyway. And the ones that I've worked with through the years have definitely been high Ds, but oftentimes high Is, even more prominently than the D. So at some point, Aaron, like each of us, this is probably true of each person on here, somebody introduced you to franchising, you discovered franchising. In my case, a guy called me to ask me to write a book for him. And I said, well, what do you do? And he said, I'm in franchising. I had no idea what that was. He said he was a franchisor. I quickly grabbed the dictionary. This was 1979, sitting in my office at Temple University. Franchisor wasn't in the dictionary, or I clearly didn't know how to spell it at the time. And that opened the door to a career that at 29 at that point, I had no idea I would end up in franchising and devote my life to it, and now devote my life to educating young people about franchising. So when did it happen for you, Aaron? When did you realize there was a thing called franchising?
So I was looking for a career change, and I reached out to a buddy of mine from college. I grew up in Southern California and went to college at UC Santa Barbara. And a buddy of mine worked at a carpet cleaning franchise, and he's like, you should get into franchise development. And I was like, what's that? You mean like McDonald's? Because that's what I thought it was.
How old?
So this was 2017. So I'm 36 now. So I was 30. Yeah. Was that math right?
Wow.
Was that math?
Just 6 years
29?
ago until you
29.
Yeah, great. And when you heard, you should get into franchise development, were you already in sales? From college to 30, what were you doing?
So from college to 30, so I graduated college, moved to Hollywood, worked at a talent agency, and was on the track to kind of become an agent. Worked on Will Smith's team, worked on Jesse Eisenberg's team, worked on Melissa Leo's team. And Melissa Leo had just won an Academy Award for The Fighter. And so I joke, like, every story that you've heard about Hollywood is 100% true. Like if anyone's seen Entourage, my life was Lloyd's life, like working for Ari Gold. So did that, started partying, lost everything, and decided I was going to get sober, moved into working in B2B sales at AT&T. I am a recovering AT&T employee. And so then a buddy of mine was like, hey, you should get into franchise development, and loved the idea of being able to help business owners become entrepreneurs, or people become business owners, and emailed his boss every 3 weeks till he hired me seven different times, and been in franchising since then. Have seen everything, I feel like, or seen a lot. I've seen the dark side of franchising. I've seen the light side of franchising, and decided, after a few years, that I wanted to do it on my own, and I wanted to do it differently than I had seen in the past, and acquired the franchise rights to a 34-year-old power washing business in January of 2023.
Backing up 6 years ago, you were in the talent seeking business. And isn't it ironic when I see people like Steve Lieber and Dan Monahan and others on here who are in franchise development, or have been, or touch on that topic at least, what are they doing? They're looking for talent.
Correct.
They're looking for the right talent to join that brand. And so you already had some good education that would help you in franchise development. And did you join franchise development in a carpet cleaning franchise?
Yep. Yep, working for ChemDry.
Okay, all right, great. That's right. So you did you equate it at all to okay, this is a matter of finding the right person, and it's got to be a person who has certain skills and wants to follow a system. That's a skill that people don't think about very often or in the right way, because we have a lot of franchisees who don't have that skill, and this results in tragic ends to many careers.
Yes and no. The ability to help people become business owners was a lot less arduous than kind of dealing with really intense personalities in Hollywood. So it was like calm in comparison. In retrospect, dealing with franchisees is almost similar to dealing with really big actors. Like, they're just, insatiable at times, right? We've all been in franchising long enough. But I was on kind of the tail end of a private equity turn, and so the need to sell units was less important than who you were selling them to, if that makes sense. And I didn't know that.
Let's talk about that for a minute, since you bring it up, and a lot of this goes on. You didn't have a lot of pressure on you to just sell a franchise.
I had a lot of pressure.
Okay, to just sell a
so
franchise.
the need to.
I thought you said that you could be more judicious about who you sold to.
No. Let me say it again in a different way. The need to sell the amount of units necessary was more important than who we were selling the units to.
All right.
So,
and
we had a lot of failures. We had a lot of kind of a lack of support infrastructure that was disheartening, and I candidly almost left franchising.
Yeah. How much did it in Hollywood, the talent business, I don't know anything about it, but you've got to do a lot of schmoozing, and you've got to know a lot of people. You got to do a lot of networking. You got to do a lot of talking. Yep. You got to be persuasive, all those things that a high eye like you is good at doing. And maybe it bothered you in Hollywood, being a talent agent, some of the sacrifices you had to make. Did it bother you in franchise development? You said you almost left. I mean, what was upsetting about your situation?
So I would sell units or award territories, and I would promise the franchisees that they would receive a certain level of support, and I had zero control over whether or not that support was going to be delivered upon. And it's been a large reason why I decided to become a franchisor, is because if I can sign people up, make the promises they're going to get the support, and then actually manage and lead the team that's supporting them, then operations and sales are 100% aligned. One of the biggest challenges I see in franchising is operations says one thing and sales says another. And then they, as the business grows, the operations teams learns things about the right franchisees to bring in and what's working and what's not. And then sales continues to sell units. And so if they go in different directions, what happens is that you have mismatched expectations, amongst the franchisees who sign up. So, anyways, I would sign people up, and then they wouldn't receive the support that I promised that they'd get.
And I realized that was new to you, but now that you've been in franchising, even though you've only been in 6 years, that's not really very long. I don't know that there's ever been a brand where the operations people said, wow, our franchise development people do a great job. They always bring us the right skill set in a franchisee. And historically, that's not the case. But you wouldn't have had that perspective. Was it easy? Was the job easy? Could you sell franchises easily?
So I could, yeah. I mean, I would say franchise sales is probably one of the hardest sells in that I've ever seen, because you have to sell someone the ability for them to take a big leap and chance on themselves, and then they pay a considerable amount of money up front, and then they're beholden to a royalty. And so I don't think it's an easy sell for most, which is why I think a lot of franchisors are limited in terms of the options and where they can find franchisees. And so they rely heavily on outsourced sales organizations and broker networks and stuff like that, because they don't have another option. They're in a very low leverage position. For me, it was easy, but what I learned when we went into Patch Boys, because that was the brand that I went into in between Rolling Suds and ChemDry, is basically it was me and a brand president, and we're the first two employees with a 100-unit franchise system when it was acquired by the company I worked for. And we effectively had to do like a turnaround of the brand. And so him and I would talk like 4, 5, 6 times a day, and we were in lockstep with one another. And there were some challenges, because we learned that a franchisee isn't going to be successful, and here's why. And then I'd have to tweak my sales system, and he'd have to tweak his ops system. But we had this immense amount of trust for one another. And we were kind of in the trenches together. So my suggestion is, it says one of the things that I've done internally at Rolling Suds is that operations and sales have to talk to each other, trust each other, respect each other, and talk regularly.
So in spite of that not happening when you first got started 6 years ago, what was it about franchise development that was easy for you? But it's not easy for many, 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 I don't know if most, but many franchisors, particularly getting started, and for franchise development. Why was it easy for you? What was different about you?
I don't know what was different about me, other than than other people who can award territories and sell units. I mean, I have an innate ability to influence people and help them make decisions that they find is their decision, versus like trying to sell. And I worry that, like, when a franchise is being sold to someone, they're being sold on a belief that they're going to receive something that they might not end up getting. Whereas, like, the way I've always done franchise sales is it's their decision. They have to come to the decision on their own. And while I'm there as a guide, it's not a heavy sales tactic pressure type situation. I fear that if we kind of continue down this like sales tactic pressure type situation with a lot of the franchise development that I've seen, we'll run the risk of more unhappy franchisees. It has to be their decision to start a business. And if it's not, and they feel like they've got to buy this thing at a certain amount of time, otherwise it's going to get taken by someone else, or one of these other scare tactics that I've seen, they're the wrong expectations are going to be set. So
how often do you think that's happening across the board? If there are, and no one knows how many franchisors are actually actively selling franchises, Fran Data, IFA will say somewhere in the range of 3,000 are actively doing so, and there are more franchises. There's a new franchise brand popping up every day, but there must be a new franchise brand dying every day, because it's been years since we've got beyond 3,500 or so franchise companies.
To be exact, it's 600 the last 2 years open, file an FDD for the first time, and 600 decide not to file the last 2 years.
Yeah, okay. But let's say there are 3,000 actively selling franchises. You ever think about, and I know you don't know all 3,000 or even 2,000 necessarily,
right.
But you're out there with a lot of people. Yeah, you're in a lot of networks, and you've been around, even though only 6, 7 years. You're a celebrity almost within franchising because of your responsible franchising gig recently with IFA. How much irresponsible franchise development do you think is going on?
People are going to disagree with me, but I think the majority of the franchises that are being sold within the franchise sales organization community are being sold irresponsibly.
Yeah, I'm afraid you might be right. We have no proof of it, and we could certainly discuss that. But I think it's a larger.
Real quick, let me clarify specifically. So I operate within the broker networks. I've done all of the deals, almost all the deals that I've done with Rolling Suds, and we've done 187 of them in a year and a half, are done with brokers that I trust. I think are ethical, wonderful people. They know my kids' names. We've vacationed together. And the reason I know that franchises are being sold irresponsibly is they call me a year after they signed someone up, and they told that person, because the brand or the FSO or whatever told them that they could sell the units as absentee. They're getting calls from these franchisees saying that they bought 5 territories, they never left their job, they were never willing to leave their job, and they lost everything. And now they're trying to sell their territories, but they have no ability to sell it because the business has no value. And so I believe that franchises are being sold irresponsibly. And I also feel like the cause of it, one of the biggest causes of it, is the FSO points the finger at the brokers, the franchisor points the finger at the FSO, and no one's really taking accountability. But the fact of the matter is everyone's misrepresenting the opportunity. So someone has to take ownership of the issue.
Okay. So I want to keep moving on in the progression of Aaron Harper. And by the way, we're going to do in November at our advisory board meeting, absentee ownership will be the topic that we drill down on, just as we did responsible franchising with you, Aaron, last April at our meeting. So you went carpet cleaning, patch boys. What happened?
I got the job offer of my lifetime to make $1 million and franchise a business from scratch, and start from scratch and get a guaranteed amount of commission and an increase in pay and a salary bump with the word president in it. And like the crazy entrepreneur I am, I said, no, thank you. I can do this on my own. I'm going to go find a business.
Why did you say no, thank you? I don't know how many people would have said, yeah, it's what I've been waiting for. Let me do it.
I think it's partially because I'm insane. And then also like, it's purpose driven for me. Like if I'm going to tell someone that they're going to get a thing and they're going to invest their life savings in it, and I don't have 100% control over the team that's providing them the thing that I promised them, then really what am I doing? And what's the point of it, right? If the point is to help people become business owners, and give them the opportunity to change their lives and have a positive impact, and I don't have the control in helping people get there, and the only way I was going to do that is if I owned the company. Majority ownership, could make decisions as I see fit, could hire people before I thought they needed to be hired, could pre-invest in the business, could raise capital at any point that I need to, could choose the partners that I partner with. And that to me was then in 2022 a non-negotiable, and forever it will remain a non-negotiable. And based on everything I've seen, that's the only way that I can actually accomplish the goals that I have.
And that was about when you got this big offer, President $1 million. Were you about 5 years into your franchise career?
Yes.
Okay. And so you knew that wasn't the right path, even though maybe it would have been an easy path to $1 million, but it was a matter of your conscience and your desire, which the I personality has a desire to help people, truly help and influence people. So that surely comes out of you. So go ahead. Then you decided, no, I'm not going to take that route. I'm going to take another route.
So I decided I was going to look for a business to franchise from scratch. So not an existing business that has been franchised, not one that already had franchisees that I'd have to fix the situation, one that I could start from scratch, partner with the right people. So I raised capital from David Barr and Brad Fishman, who have been mentors of mine, and could provide a long-term mentorship, as I was referred to as intellectual capital, help me dodge bullets, potentially figure out who to hire. They've done this before. Met a 34-year-old power washing company out of Philadelphia, and a family business called Rolling Suds. And they had built a $2+ million power washing business. And I met them. They were interviewing other franchisors who they didn't feel confident that those franchisors would honor their family name in the way that we've been able to. And so we partnered. I met them in September of 2022, acquired the franchise rights in January of last year, and built a franchise system, raised a significant amount of capital, and we've turned away about a little over $10 million in revenue from franchise startup costs. So about 59 franchisees wanted to write us a $200,000 check, and we said no. And we've signed up now 51 franchisees who have purchased 187 territories, and every single one of those franchisees will be open by September.
Okay. And going back a little bit again, the 51 franchisees have come from your broker network, who you referred to as people who they know your kids' names and you vacation with them. There are a lot of brokers out there, and don't they all want to get on the bandwagon for Rolling Suds? And how have you managed to hold this to, and I don't know, are you talking about 6 brokers, or you're talking about 16 brokers who are doing the work?
No, I do most of my work predominantly with one network. As you know, Alicia Visconti and I are very close.
4 minutes, gentlemen.
Thank you.
So I make it very clear to the consultants when I start working with them who my candidate and my buyer is and who it isn't. And I also make it very clear to them on how to present it to that candidate. So here are the bullet points. Here's how I present it. And also, here's what happens if you bring me someone who isn't that person. And so as I go into the relationship with that consultant, they have very clear expectations set of, like, this is, you can send me that person, but I'm going to give them back to you. And here's why. But there's a whole element of broker management that needs to be done before you actually start presenting your brand. Because otherwise, you're just going to have a bunch of brokers who throw spaghetti at the wall, and then you're going to waste a ton of time talking to the wrong people.
So you spend a lot of time. I met you, I think, at the FranServe convention. Lisa is a member of our advisory board and provides a mini internship to one of our students coming up in July. One of my students will be there among all those brokers and franchisors again. So it's a wonderful opportunity. You spend what percentage of your time discussing the world of franchising by Aaron Harper with brokers?
So before I started selling Patch Boys, I spent about 7 months developing relationships with brokers, trusting. It was the middle of COVID, so we didn't have broker community, like network, like we didn't have events. So it was cold calling brokers and making sure they understood who I was, most importantly, and also that I wanted to understand who they were as people. They're not just lead sources, they're people. They have wants and desires and values, and they like certain brands and they dislike certain brands. And I think the challenge that some franchisors get into is they just think they're lead sources, and they're going to pay 30 grand or whatever and get leads. And that's not the case. I have the lowest membership possible, but I have the deepest relationships. And so I don't need to pay the extra amount of money. because it's a waste of money due to the relationships that I have. And so anyone who's trying to sell units or find franchisees needs to establish very meaningful relationships with the consultants or the brokers that they work with.
I think that's so important what you just said. And again, it takes a high eye to realize that this is the way to go in franchising. You emphasize building relationships. You have not emphasized how much money you have to pay to be part of the network. Matthew, I know we're up against the clock. So Aaron, it's a great story, and I'd like to continue it in some way, some other time, probably. Matthew?
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. This has been great.
Thank you, gentlemen. That was #awesome, as they would say. So if anybody in the audience wants to stay in touch with Aaron or Professor Hayes, here are their QR codes. You could pull out your iPhones and or Androids and scan those, and it will probably link you right to their LinkedIn where you can reach out to them, either of them. So that brings us to the conclusion of this. We have about 2 minutes to our next one. Not quite enough time for any questions from the audience, but I do encourage each of you to go ahead and connect with them, reach out, and try to ask questions. These people have years and years of franchising expertise, and they're both mentors to me, and I look up to them both dearly. So
thank you, guys. It's been great.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Got it, Aaron. All right, so our next session starts in about a minute. It's Little Big Brand Strategies, and it's going to be a fireside chat session between Max and Jessica. Max, if you want to go ahead and unmute your mic, and Jessica, are you with us? Because maybe I missed you in the audience.
I'm here.
Yeah, we're
Awesome.
here.
Yes. I was a little worried there, Jessica. I'm not gonna lie to you. I must have skipped your name, and I was freaking out a little bit. I was sending an email or two. So, all right, let's jump right into it. So, for those in the audience who don't know who Max is, he's actually the CEO and co-founder of the CMO Peer Talks Community and Promo Republic. So he has dedicated his career to transforming the engagement between multi-location brands, franchisees, and local communities with breakthrough marketing technology. His mission is to drive franchise growth through the synergy of community and tech. Is that about right, Max? I read that for the people in the audience who might be illiterate. Just kidding. It's a joke.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot, Matthew. You're doing a great job moderating the conference, and thanks for the introduction. Yeah, indeed, we are on a mission to provide a stage for experience exchange, because we think it de-risks and helps franchises grow, and also makes franchisees succeed at a faster pace, and also de-risks them because they're entrepreneurs, and obviously we also help with innovative technology, marketing technology, developing.
And your speaker is going to be Jessica Serrano, head of marketing at Dig. Do you want to introduce yourself, or Max, do you want to introduce her?
Yeah, Jessica, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, happy to. So Dig is a company-owned restaurant concept based in the Northeast. We have 32 locations, but prior to leading marketing at Dig, I've worked in a couple of traditional QSR concepts, including Burger King and Taco Bell. So happy to be here and share my experience kind of across both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, thanks a lot for joining, and thanks a lot for being open to share the experience that you got in this amazing career. So here's really short the agenda, at least the planned one. I think we could go in more depth, and we could have some additional questions from the audience, but that's at least the initial plan. And of course, we wanna learn from you, and especially because our fireside chat is called a Little Big Brand Strategy. So you have experience with both now, and I want to just kick it off with the first question. And as a marketing leader, having those different perspectives, managing marketing for a brand with I don't know, 8 billion in revenues with a B or something like that, with thousands of locations, and now helping, and how you approach local marketing at that level, with that of of a size of an organization, and what is the biggest shift? So how do you approach marketing now, being more hands-on and being closer to those to locations of your current challenge? So please double click on that.
Yeah, certainly. So the biggest shift, simply put, is budget. So when a brand has, 10 billion in revenue and a marketing fund funded by franchisors in the hundreds of millions of dollars, you certainly have a lot of options. And in large franchise organizations like those, local store marketing is really relegated at the franchise level, and corporate is really, creating toolkits and assets to help support that. But a lot of that expertise is left up to the operators. And so shifting into a brand at a smaller scale and earlier in its inception, I really had to come to appreciate what it is that franchisors are expected to do when it comes to opening new restaurants. And so, Dig was founded in 2011, whereas I came from brands that were founded in the 60s and have, decades of household awareness that they've built nationally and even globally. So to now be working in a brand in its infancy, I had to really learn how to build that awareness in a way that was really boots on the ground. And so I feel like I've grown so much as a marketer in my ability to figure out how to break through with smaller budget. So, one of the things that has been interesting in my time at Dig is the majority of our locations are in Manhattan. And so we have pretty decent awareness in our core market. Our concept lends itself really well to young professionals that are working in the city and are looking for an affordable meal that they can kind of come down from their office and enjoy. And that made a lot more sense pre-COVID. With COVID, a lot of those folks moved remotely, and we had to kind of not only evolve our brand strategy, but also our real estate strategy into more suburban markets. So I found myself opening 3 new states in a matter of 6 weeks. And I will tell you that opening, the 19th Dig in Manhattan is much easier than opening the first in Connecticut or the first in New Jersey or the first in DC, where people aren't familiar with the brand at all. And I'd say one of the biggest things I've learned when it comes to new restaurant openings is to not just think of it as a day. It really does come down to having kind of a pre-opening strategy, opening, and then even post, because it doesn't end once you open the doors for the first time.
Got it. So, and did you expect that, or you had to react immediately when the challenges of the new openings like popped up? So, did you have to adjust on the go, or did you learn it the hard way, or you were kind of prepared for that type of?
I'd say I definitely learned it the hard way. And in some ways, opening those 3 new markets was a little bit like Goldilocks in that, one, I'd say we got just right. One was way off, and one was kind of almost there. And so I've had to learn how much site selection and competitive set, like no 2 openings is the same because of all the different market conditions. So I definitely had ones where we opened and we ran out of food because it was so successful, and then other ones that we didn't quite get it right and had to really focus on that post opening strategy. So it's been a lot of trial and error. Yeah.
Thanks for admitting that, because it's important to understand that things can go not as planned. And you also mentioned opened those locations in states where the awareness was not so big. So how could you transfer this value proposition, and how did you kind of shorten the period to make sure people understand as fast as possible what is it so special about Dig?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I did was we did focus on the pre-period. So for example, when we opened in Stamford, Connecticut, we opened in April, but in the months prior, we worked with the landlord to do a pop-up in the parking lot, and we gave away free produce. And so we just, popped up one Saturday. I hired a face painter, put some balloons up, and we just invited people to stop by, and we sent them home with a tote bag with produce. And it allowed us to start having conversation with folks in the market around, well, what is Dig? And, at the time we were very farm to table focused. And so we were kind of showcasing our farmers by giving away free produce. And it helped to start planting seeds with people in the community that we were coming. And a lot of that dialogue helped us to learn who the folks were in the community, and it helped us to get smarter and prep for that opening. Influencers, I know that term gets thrown around a lot, but there really is value in finding who are the folks, even on a micro level. We're not talking about, influencers with millions of followers, but a person with even 2,000 followers who's focused on, Stanford new restaurant openings as their niche can be really powerful person to connect with. And so what we did was we had a dinner and we invited them to come in and we fed them. And it really got that, FOMO drumming up, so that then by the time we were opening the doors, there was a line of folks who were excited and ready to come in and try it. So a big part of building that awareness is not waiting until the day that you're ready to open your doors to start building that relationship with the community. We also talked a lot to our neighbors. So really just even going into the local businesses and saying, hey, we're Dig, we're opening in the shopping center down the street. We learned a lot from them. And we've also found that other operators, businesses are excited when new business is coming into their market. And it just helps them to also kind of spread the word and start pushing people into your locations as well. So I think the weeks prior to the opening is really critical to drumming up some of that anticipation.
Yeah, so it's of course like different understanding on the level of Burger King. Of course, an influencer with 2,000 followers is nothing, but here you go hyper local, so you have the time to go into depth and to understand the context more and how the opinion is built in that specific community, and then of course you can do like a more thoughtful and more connected launch in a way, and with that like connect with the local customers like faster and through the channels.
Totally.
Go comfortable for them. I think we're already covering the second question about those local marketing tactics. Thanks for switching the slide for us. And how do you think it's I think even opening the first store in a definite state, it's kind of sets the standards for the future stores there. And
yeah.
So the importance of making things right and creating the real experience inside the store, and also the communications around it is important. And
Definitely.
And did you have like experience of the second store opening in the new state? Is it then easier when you have already one running?
Yes, yeah. I think I definitely in hindsight, I really highly recommend kind of going a little bit deeper in fewer markets than spreading really thin, because it was really challenging. So this year I've been really excited that we've been focusing on opening in markets where we already have a presence. So we did open Georgetown, DC last year. And then this year we opened our second in what they call the DMV area in Bethesda. And it really helped to now kind of have a story that is, hey, this is a market that we want to build deeper roots into. So I definitely have felt the ease of focusing on, opening second and third in one community, as opposed to coming into multiple communities with one location.
Yeah, that's encouraging. So it becomes easier at some point until you go for the new market, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely think new markets are even more challenging for sure.
Gotcha. Okay, so if anyone has additional questions on the local marketing strategies, please post them in the chat. And now we're moving from local marketing, hyper local marketing tactics to the use of tech and marketing technology. So in your experience of working in the companies in the companies, multi-location companies of different sizes, so what is the difference in what role MarTech played, and how is there a difference how you use and how you select technology stack in these different organizations?
Definitely. Yeah. So, Taco Bell is a part of Yum Brands. Burger King is a part of Restaurant Brands International. When you talk about these multi-brand conglomerates, they often have shared services because they have multiple brands under one organization. So they benefit from a lot of economies of scale. When you start talking about smaller concepts, typically, you just don't have the benefit of scale, and so these decisions from a technology tech standpoint can be really daunting and challenging. And I will tell you that when I joined Dig, we actually did have quite a bit of custom tech, and that might seem counterintuitive, but it was partially because the tech stack just wasn't as critical in the restaurant space, at least in fast casual pre-COVID. So much of the business was still dine-in, so it almost made more sense to just kind of build something custom because it wasn't as integral to the business. And obviously that's changed significantly. But at the same time, the other thing that's changed is a proliferation of restaurant-specific tech solutions. And so my tech counterpart has done a fantastic job over the last, call it 18 months. It's been a very long project to move us into more out-of-the-box solutions. And we're just so excited by that, because when you have custom tech, the pro is that you can make it exactly as you like. The con is that costs a lot from a dev standpoint. And if something goes wrong, it's kind of all on your in-house team. And so by partnering with existing and proven restaurant tech solutions, kind of have this whole support system, and you're really sharing the economies of scales of other small restaurant chains using the same technology. So I'd say in this climate, buy is definitely the preferred option versus build.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you said improving and proven. I think both is right, because they're proven, but because there are many customers and there's a lot of feedback, and of course it's constant flow of innovation you don't have to pay for, as if you
exactly
if you would have it, if you would have it yourself. And do you see an opportunity of so how do you see the usage of marketing technology? Do you prefer to use it like centralized, or do you see that the technology became so easy to use that location managers can actually do part of the local marketing themselves?
That is a really good question, and not an easy one to answer. I think the answer is different for every organization. Dig, our concept is we pride ourselves on scratch cooking. I know a lot of people say that, but it really is true. All of our locations are run by chef operators. So we have quite a bit of bias towards letting chefs chef and really having them focus on the hospitality and the food quality within the four walls of their restaurant. So in exchange for that, our team tries to bear as much of the responsibility as possible on their behalf when it comes to local store marketing. We always have this debate, even with things like Google reviews. Who should respond? Should it be the operator who kind of knows the exact dynamics of what happened in their restaurant, or should we manage it on their behalf? We've chosen to manage it on their behalf so that they can focus on their restaurant, but sometimes I may reach out and say, hey, this review was oddly specific about this situation, and get their input. Or I may reach out to them and say, hey, this customer is really upset. I think you should give them a call yourself. But for the most part, we try and manage it on their behalf unless there's an outlier. But I could certainly respect why some organizations choose to do it differently. There's no one answer.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. Still, like multi-location companies that own all the locations, of course, want to have everything streamlined and under control because they value brand a lot, and it's all about the economies of scale and how you standardize the standardized processes. On the other hand, of course, we know there is franchise where those organizations are actually by nature are forced to do distributed marketing, and of course that brings a lot of challenges. But some of the locations they just perform so well because they somehow find this recipe of being hyper contextualized and localized. I think we discussed this case with a bigger company that bought back, like it used to be a franchise, and then it went to centralized, and it bought out most of the locations, but some of them stayed franchise. and their marketing performance still stands out.
Yes.
However, the standard level for all the others is much more even, and the average marketing performance of all location, of course, grew. So it's always this type of like dilemma, and of course we work hard to make sure marketing technology will be as automated and as compliant on multiple levels, both on corporate and on location levels. So also centralized run organizations can rest assured that local marketing is actually done locally, but the right way. Yes.
Yeah, totally. I mean, there are a lot of tools now with AI automation that help, at least that you don't even have to start from a blank slate, and you can even train it to make sure that it's within brand tone. And I think in the case that you described, the role of the franchisor in that situation is to be observing and creating case studies around which are the operators that are having the most success, and then sharing that with the rest of the system. Opportunity to showcase best in class execution.
And hopefully not just sharing the experience, but actually reverse engineering it and then kind of putting it into the AI that helps to enable locations. So, but that's at the moment kind of everyone's dream, but I think it's going to be fulfilled faster than we all think. And of course, like moving to the next part of our discussion. So it's actually Q&A, but maybe we can start with the practical advice for operators. So what type of things? So you're now working really close with everyone, and I'm sure you know all of the operators within your location company. So how do you collaborate? What works for them dealing with the challenges? What doesn't work? So maybe you can give some practical advice for operators.
Yeah, when I'm interacting with my operation counterparts and restaurant leaders, my role is to really listen for what are the themes around that are unique to their location. Are they near a college? Are they seeing that it's mostly families? And so then once I have those insights, then what are the right tactics to support them? And I will say that I think sometimes people want a magic bullet, right, when sales aren't where they need to be. But the truth is there isn't one. And the best path forward is just to start, and better to come up with, in a brainstorm, 10 ideas and just start trying them and coming up with quick learnings around what works and doesn't, than to wait for some, perfectly crafted strategy. So, there's been a couple instances over the last couple of years where we've had maybe a restaurant in particular that was underperforming. And my reaction in that is, well, let's get on the phone, let's brainstorm. Okay, let's come away with 10 things, and who's responsible for each one? Like, put a accountability lead on each tactic and manage it. So literally put it in an Excel file and even try and put some KPIs around it. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but how will we know we are successful? Example, hey, let's do fundraising. Okay, Bob, you're in charge of that tactic. How are you going to go run it down? Go find 10 schools, 10 hospitals, send them an email. We will feel successful if we do 3 fundraisers this season. And how much money did we donate? How many people do we think tried it? Let's do a promotional code for, the college around the corner. How many redemptions did we get? Just start bulleting out a list of tactics and try measuring them. And when something doesn't work, you cross it off the list, you fail fast. And by the end of a sprint like that, if you walk away with 3 proven tactics that you feel help move things in the right direction, then you found success. So that's my biggest suggestion, is just start and check in often. Create a weekly accountability meeting, and that's the only way that you'll really start to feel progress in the right direction, is trial and error, KPI setting, and accountability checkpoints.
You're muted, Max.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Matthew. Yeah, so that really sounds like an advice for a startup, which the new locations actually are, and so better better to try out and fail fast than rather than plan forever and go like overanalyze. And so decisiveness is the best strategy. Speed up things. Yes.
I think that we have enough time here to hear from the audience. Can I get some questions, or will we have to sit here in silence again as we did earlier?
Hey, Jessica, I had a question. It was well, two questions actually. The first one was with regards to attribution. How do you think about attribution? How do you use it? How important is it to you?
It's pretty important to me. So there were certain tactics that I may do that I believe drive awareness, but I don't have a great path to attribution. And so there will be a handful of those things, because just based off of years of experience, there are certain things that you just kind of know move the needle, but you can't quite measure. But it's really important to me to have a healthy balance of things that do. And so a case in point would be, I had a location in Harvard Square that was really struggling. And I started doing these trial days, and I did it at Harvard. They have like houses, they're kind of like dorms. And we started reaching out to these houses and saying, okay, today's your dig day. You get to come in, you get a discount off. And the problem was that I was doing it off of walk-in, and I wasn't really able to calculate how incremental it was, right? So then optimize that. And for the next wave, we started doing them as pickup codes. So then we at least had more traction of this email address came in on this promo code, but then I was able to track their repeat rate over time and prove out the ROI that it was worth it, that giving that free food actually drove not only conversion, but ultimately loyalty. So I do think that it's important to have a balance of kind of awareness tactics that are harder to measure, but also ones that you have a pretty clear line of sight to.
Yeah, that's actually really quite helpful. The other question I just had for you is with regards to just how noisy messaging is becoming. The people are just overwhelmed with a lot of noise. How are you thinking about that, and how do you get through that?
Oof, that's a great point. And I think that's the balance of brand versus performance. So a lot of what we're talking about is more in terms of the actual conversion, but it's important to also invest time in making sure that you have a brand point of view that stands out. So there's two different ways to talk about discounts, right? I can talk to you about a BOGO, and so can 100 other brands. But if my brand tone allows me to say, you and a friend eat free, bad example, but finding those articulations that feel, dig for two maybe is a way of saying, okay, how do we do it in a way that feels unique and ownable to our brand? So always trying to make sure that we're not positioning discounts in a way that cheapens, but feels like an ownable point of difference. That's that balance between brand and performance that we're always trying to strike, or we're always trying to achieve.
Well, that's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I'm writing furiously. That was phenomenal questions. We have about 10 minutes till our next session. Does anybody else in the audience have any burning questions? Don't be shy.
If nobody else says, I have another one actually. I was wondering if you could maybe speak to a little bit about how your methodology of marketing has evolved over the past years. Like, how are you changing in terms of how you think about the way to do your job?
Yeah, I love that topic. One thing is focusing on top of funnel. And so, one of the things that I learned when I joined this business, I mentioned briefly household awareness. So there was a study that the team had done that showed that we had relatively low household awareness in our core market in New York City. When I tell my colleagues in my brand that, they're surprised. And it's because we all have this proximity bias that, the people around us, oh yeah, I know Dig. Well, that's because they're people similar to you that fit our profile. But when you think about New York City, there are 5 million adults in New York City. So what percentage of them know about our brand, have tried our brand, have tried it more than twice, consider it to be in their top 4, you start to whittle that down. It's a very narrow group of folks. And I think a lot of marketing theory focuses on trying to get those hundreds of thousands of people to repeat one more time. But man, the truth is how brands grow is by focusing on getting those 5 million people to try once. And it's hard to do that. And it's a lot cheaper to convert a loyal fan into one more visit. But it really is about top of funnel awareness. And so that changes the way that I talk about my brand when I focus on top of funnel, because I believe if I get more people in to try, the loyalty will follow. So if I talk about my menu in language like, hey, come try the new winter menu, well, who does that really speak to? It speaks to the bottom of the funnel, because in order to be excited about my winter menu, you have to know that, oh, Dig launches a new seasonal menu every 3 months, and I love Dig, and therefore I'm going to love the next thing on the menu. So this winter, we talked about try our new crispy chicken. That's a different way of talking that is more broadly appealing to whether you've tried Dig or not. You're seeing this really craveable chicken, come on in and try it. And then how do I do as many trial driving tactics as possible to get people in the restaurant? So I'm a big advocate for focusing on top of funnel over frequency.
What would you say, like one super tactile, maybe it's something like influencer marketing or something that you've done that's a top of funnel activity that everybody in the audience can take away from? Could be something guerrilla, could be something traditional, just something very tangible that they could take with their paws.
To build off of that specific example, so one of the things that we did was for that winter launch is we did crispier hour. Again, to this point about how do I break through all the noise? So I wanted people to come and try our new crispy chicken. So what I did was between the hours of 2 and 5, I did a promotion where you can try the crispy chicken on any Dig bowl for only $5. Now I put it during a window off peak where it wasn't going to cannibalize too much of my business, but it definitely drove incremental business. And in terms of how I calculated that, as I looked at the sales during that window in the weeks prior versus that promo period and saw the lift there. So that's just an example is trial, right? Is, hey, I want people to come in and try this. How can I lower the barrier? Well, here's a discount that you have to come in and try it during this very particular period. It was 1 hour on one day just to get people in the door to try a new product.
I'm hearing a lot of accountability, right? Earlier you spoke about if you're trying to make change, putting one person in charge of it and then just actually doing those things. And the same could be said, I think, about the trial. So I think that is very, very, smart goals, right? We all hear about them, but I think with that point, Max, do you have any closing remarks for the session?
I actually have one more question. I just need to ask it because we touched the data question and the analysis of the funnel. So, and I see that more and more companies and brands, they are like just visiting those conventions and events. Most of the speeches are, of course, about AI, but also on how to generate quality data, how to use more data in making marketing decisions, how to make sure you can get like some actionable insights from the data. So are there any other examples on how you could generate data and use it for your decisions? So what type of KPIs, what type of data sources do you use in your day-to-day work or maybe in a planning?
Yeah, I mean, everyone at least has the benefit of their sales data, I would hope. And so at a minimum, I think there's a lot of richness in just even looking at sales, which items perform best, which day parts, which channels, all of those insights are at a minimum. And then on top of that, to the comment around, tech stack, there are a lot of other tools that can help take that data to the next level. Loyalty is a great one. I mean, the real reason why everyone does loyalty is because it gives you first party data about your customers in a longitudinal manner. So we use Thanks as our loyalty partner, and I'm able to see a lot of really rich insights through that data. So I'd say, lean into your tech stack for those insights, and also, don't be afraid to really be quite insistent with them about walk me through it, help me to understand it. extract as much value from those relationships as possible, because they have a lot of resources on their end, and if you are insistent, they often are willing to help you more than you might realize. But even if you don't have all of that, just spending time in the sales numbers can be quite insightful as well.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And maybe last question is about the future plans. So what are the midterm and long-term things that you have in mind and that inspire you? Because I see that like more connection to locations and to operators inspires you a lot. So you see how your advice and what things you do, the things that you do are actually helping them, and you feel like your decisions move the needle. But what's the big goal and midterm, long-term goals that are inspiring you?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love what we do. I love this business. I think there's something so amazing about the power of food and how it can bring folks together. In terms of our goals, it's to scale. So looking forward to putting, more units into the ground over the next several years, and to continue to build the brand love that we've just kind of started to percolate in Manhattan to new markets as well. But I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm happy to continue the conversation with anybody who maybe didn't want to ask a question in this format. Feel free to reach out. Happy to chat this anytime.
Yeah, thanks a lot for joining. It was a privilege to have you. Thanks for sharing all the advice. And yeah, like the whole America needs dig as fast as possible. So hope you scale faster than you.
Especially Florida, right, Jessica? We're coming to Florida next.
We all agreed on that. Yeah.
Yes. So that's the next market we're entering. If anybody in the audience is in Florida, so please, guys, connect with these people. They're a wealth of knowledge. Seriously, take advantage of it. Only in these franchising types of communities do you get to speak directly to industry leaders. I mean, it's not common. So please take advantage of it. And with that, a massive thank you, big hugs. And we're rolling into our next session, which is titled Women, which is in conjunction with Women in Franchising. And the title is Who Runs the World? And as you can guess, the answer to that is women, right? So I think it's a Beyonce quote, but could be wrong about that. So it's going to be a 40-minute career talk, women's stories in franchising. And like I said, the title is Who Runs the World? So here's the agenda. What sparked your franchising journey? Our speakers we're going to be hosted by Madeline Zusk. So please go ahead and unmute your mic and take it away.
Hi, everyone. I think I know most of you here. Tony, you're crushing it with the day glow over there. I love it. Well, I'm happy to be back. I haven't hosted in a hot second, so I'm excited to do this panel specifically. My background is as follows. Currently a multi-brand, multi-unit franchisee of 4 different home service brands. We have upwards of about 50 units in the Philadelphia area. Currently the interim CMO at Premium Service Brands. We've got 9 home service brands, 600 franchisees across about 1,300 locations. And I'm also the founder of Brand Careers, which is an executive franchise recruiting firm, and also do a lot of marketing and business consulting in the franchising world as well. So super excited to be here, have all the sides of franchising, successful locations, failed locations, acquisitions, you name it. And joining me, we'll pass the buck right over to one of my mentors and someone who I consider a dear friend. Well, all of them, but Diane, please take it away.
Good to see you all, and thanks so much for having us. And of course, I got reached out to about if I wanted to hang out with this group of women. I'm like, are you kidding? These are my friends, and we would be friends in real life, I like to say, not just in franchise life. So it's always fun to sit and talk with other powerful women that are in franchising. Right now, I am the COO of Wise Coatings. We're an emerging brand. We have 33 locations. We're going to finish this year at 50, and then it's finished next year with 100. As everyone knows, the big balance is finding the way to franchise and get all the sales in, but make certain the corresponding operations and support are there at the same time. That's something we're working very hard on to make certain that we provide that good balance so our franchisees feel well supported and taken care of. I found my way to franchising. I stumbled into it. I'm so curious how many people stumbled into franchising. Did anybody?
Everybody
stumble in. I think it's our way, right? We stumble in. And so I stumbled into it, but I've had what I like call three careers. I was in corporate America. I owned my own meeting and event planning business for a while. And then I've been in franchising now for 24 years. And some of those careers kind of coincided with each other because my experience level would be that I'm 167 years old, but because I've been done so many things in these different areas at the same time. But I've been in franchising 24 years. I helped Shannon Wilburn with Just Between Friends grow the brand from one little crummy location in Tulsa, Oklahoma to 160 in 32 states. And now I'm doing the same thing at Wise Coatings, and it's really been a lot of fun. I love being in this particular, I'm in-home services. And for those of you who are women in in-home services, you know that it's where people say that I'm a woman in construction now because, we do a lot of work in people's garages and fall kind of in that category. And I'm thinking, I never thought I would be considered to be a woman in construction. And yet here I am. So, thanks for having me.
Moving on, we have Ashley Mitchell, who we are, I swear, we're like sisters, but unfortunately, Pennsylvania is bigger than I anticipated, so we're actually a couple hours away. But she is the VP of Marketing over at East Coast Wings and Grill. So we're gonna flip it, formerly with Streamline Brands, now with East Coast Wings and Grill. So she's got the youth market as well as the food market covered. Ashley, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And yes, we are too far. It's like so close, but so far. So as Maddie said, I'm Ashley. So I've spent my entire career in marketing communications roles. I started franchising when, like Diane, I fell into it in 2014 after about 6 or so years stint with the Walt Disney Company. So my franchise experience, as Maddie alluded to, kind of spans consumer marketing, franchise development marketing, mergers and acquisitions, both acquiring and being acquired by, and working with different private equity firms. I've been a fractional CMO with a handful of brands in a variety of industries: youth enrichment, beauty concepts, QSR, B2B services, home services, and I currently lead all things marketing for East Coast Wings and Grill.
Love it. And then rounding us up, we've got Tony. Tony, thanks for joining. Tony is, I don't want to say new on the space, but very, very recently started to gain a lot of popularity with, how great she has been at coaching others to succeed. So I'm really excited to have her on here.
Thank you so much, Madeline. I just got a caveat. I am not going for the sexy. The lights just went out in Houston's getting another bad storm. So I am by cell phone light and battery on the computer. If I drop off, y'all know what happens. So my name's
You're making it work.
Making it work. And it goes with my brand. Tony Harris Taylor. I'm the CEO and founder of Drastic Results. See, drastic. Not just drastic, but drastic results, marketing and sales coaching, where I partner with franchisors to teach their franchisees how to show up, be up, follow up, so they can blow up their business. I'm also an author by that same title. I am a award-winning multi-unit franchise owner with Network in Action. Network in Action, just for your point of reference, is in the category of BNI, but different. I like to say their burgers are round, ours are square, but we have, and I run a franchise supplier group as well. So I'm happy to be here and honored to be asked.
Awesome. Well, I might go a little bit off script, but Promo Republic knows that is the Maddie way. So we're going to get right in here. And instead of just talking about sparking, there you go, sparking the
that's better.
Yeah, exactly. I think what is going to be kind of some of the most beneficial talking points for the people on here is less about us and more about the how and the why for women in franchising. And I want to focus on something that Michelle and Courtney and Erich over at Franchise Business Review focus a lot about on and have a report on it, is top franchises for women. And as Diane kind of alluded to, it wouldn't be, the stereotypical, consignment children, but a lot of it is in home services. One of my biggest brands, Made Pro, is there as well. So it really spans a lot of industries. And Ashley, I want to start with you on what does it mean to be one of the top franchises for women, and why is it important that we pull that kind of list? I think it's very apparent for those on this call that we realize that, while there is always going to be maybe a pay gap, or we're still always fighting for equity on, the female to male side of things, I think franchising for the most part has always been very welcoming. I have never felt like we didn't belong at the table, but unfortunately for most of society, that is something that women will continue to battle along with other segments of people. So why is it important, and why is that we pull this list, and why is franchising so great for female entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I mean, it's super important because it shows that your brand is, to Maddie's point, welcoming to everybody. And it gives you that diversity of different opinions. We all see things from a different lens for various different reasons. And so if it's something where you can say we are a best franchise for women, it shows that you value those different perspectives, and you don't just want cookie cutter, the same exact franchisee. You want men, you want women, you want people of different ethnicities. Like, all of those different things are so important to having a well-rounded franchise brand, because those are also the customers that you're serving. You're not serving somebody that is the same as everybody else. Every single person is not going to be the same. So you need to have those different perspectives and opinions on your team, from your franchisees at your executive table, to make sure that you're hitting all of those points and not just going in so narrow focused.
I agree. And Diane, talk to me a little bit too, because you talked about Fran Dev and why it's important, to Ashley's point, to bring on different segments of women. Are women one of your target audiences? I know for Made Pro, we often made these kind of, I guess we'll call them avatars, where one of them was the mom that wants to make it home in time for their kids' soccer games. The other one, one that's empty nester and ready to start their own career. So is that something that you look at segmenting, Diane?
Maddie, of course you gave an amazing example right there, because what the example that you gave is that we can't make it in business on the one cookie cutter type. Mm-hmm. If you haven't looked around, that cookie cutter is looking a lot different these days, right? And so if you think that it's, well, we have this one avatar, that's who we're going for. Well, certainly in the case of it, since we're running about a 50-50 male to female, I guess if you don't mind not getting 50% of the business that's available out there. And when you look at people of color, when you look at people of different varying ages, I mean, we want them all, right? We want to be able to appeal to all. So I know one of the things that we've worked through, and I've now my third franchise company, is to certainly identify your primary avatar. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Who is the most likely person that would be coming into, from a franchise development standpoint, who would be most likely to own this company? But then finding your secondary avatars also, because there's so much gold in those hills. And I know when I was working with JBF, our primary avatar was a mom, aged 25 to 35 years old. That's who it was. But what about all the grandparents that raise kids now? What about all the single dads? What about the dads that have, there's dad couples that have kids? So I guess we didn't want all those other people's business, but don't we want all their business? Plus, we want them to feel welcome, that they can be a part of us. And I will say at Wise Coatings, we're traditionally, we have 2 female owners. They are rocking it, and they're incredibly good. And so right now, that's our focus, is to be certain that we are identifying those people, who it is that is the most likely person to be successful with us. The wonderful thing about franchising, as everyone knows, is yes, you work like crazy, but you do have the flexibility. What's the latest survey? 50% of the people go into this now because they want control and flexibility over their own time. And that's something that, regardless of what gender you are, what age you are, that is very appealing to all of us.
Yeah, and you made a good point on like who your target customer is. So one of premium service brands is ProLift garage doors, and we're talking garage doors. Like you would think male all the way. You know who the primary purchaser is are the females. They're the moms. And one of the reason being is that one of the biggest causes for accidents when it comes to outside the home is garage doors falling on children, falling on pets. So I really encourage you as well when you're describing not only the offering that, you know, your product or your service brings to families and women and men, but also, you know, how does that benefit you from a franchise development level? Oftentimes I consult with a lot of franchise brands that, you know, we're so good. Look at this press release. We do this, we do that. But what are the benefits for your owners? And if you're segmenting them out, you know, oftentimes, and I know I've got 3 young kids, and it's amazing the amount of emails and calls I get from the school versus my husband. And we both have the same, we're both listed as the primary. So it would behoove me to not at least say that one of the benefits would be being home more, being more active. And those are the kind of pain points. Those are the kind of benefits that your potential franchisees want to see, that oftentimes a lot of other career opportunities are not giving or not vocalizing to a lot of the segments of people. And you can even say, you know, to people with disabilities, people of color. I know that the IFA is doing this Ascension program that's really, really great to bring even more diversity into franchising. So I encourage you to not only do it, but really hone in on the reasons and the details and the benefits of why we want diversity, not because we want to be able to put stats on the scorecard, but because we truly understand that we're benefiting all sorts of different lives. So Tony, talk to me about how you coach your franchisees. What are and franchisors? What about ones that might not be, you know, one of the top franchises for women? What about the ones that, you know, maybe they're only employing men, or they're not appealing to their entire target market? And to make things a little uncomfortable, because that's what I do, I am a consultant for a brand, and they are a franchising concept that deals with kind of watching the children, if you will. And one of the franchisees is Black and said that they only want to target Black women-owned businesses and networking capabilities. And it can be hard for franchisors to tiptoe around that and say, well, if you only do that, I respect that you're Black, I respect you've got diversity, but you're also going to segment out a big portion of your potential customers. So how would you kind of approach that for franchisors that might not be as inclusive, but not necessarily, but more by accident?
So thank you for that question. I appreciate that. When I first came into franchising, I was literally shocked of the lack of diversity. And I talk about it openly like you, the lack of diversity. And here's what I know for sure. The franchising world is not networking and showing up where women are, people that don't look like them are. And the only way you're going to reach a different demographic is to show up where those people are. And I get it that you may be uncomfortable. And so you've got to learn how to show up there, or have people in your friend dev world that look like the people you want to target and can speak the language and show up in the rooms. Now, I'm all about getting uncomfortable, getting drastic. And so in order to recruit a different demographic, no matter who it is, you got to be in the rooms where those people are. And to speak to that franchisee who only wants to target a certain demographic, there's no difference than, you know, white males only targeting white males. You're leaving out a lot of money. And listen, we're here to make money. And so I would coach her on, and it's probably her comfort zone. It's back to people are staying in their comfort zone instead of hitching your wagon to someone who can show you the way, or being there with you to help you navigate. So my goal, I'm relatively new to franchising, 5 years, but my goal is to also talk to fran dev teams about how to network for diversity. Because if we stay the same, it's not going to win. You're not going to win. Our population out here looks totally different than it does inside of franchising. And so I'm actually on a mission to bridge the gap, help y'all, I'm in Texas, help y'all bridge the gap between the entrepreneur ecosystems out here, women, Blacks, Hispanics, Asians out here, and bridge the gap into franchising. It's all about getting out your comfort zone, finding people who are connectors inside those areas you want to be in, and then building relationships, showing up, and it's amazing how things will transform.
So, and actually, I was going to say, just to piggyback on that, like, I do think that franchising has gotten a lot more diverse in the time that I've been in franchising. I'm not saying it's there all the way, and it has a long way to go, obviously, but it has, you know, from the first time that I went to a franchise conference 10 years ago to now, there are definitely more people that are in those rooms than were, more types of people. And I think that that's great, because I think that what that says is that people are raising their hand and willing to do it and do the work to get involved. So I think we're making steps in the right direction.
Now I'm going to call out someone who's not on the panel, but I think would have very good insight. Marianne Murphy, who was with Floor Coverings International forever. I want to ask a question about, a lot of this is going to fall back on, you know, transitioning a little bit more to consumers, but your business coaches and having to have tough conversations. So I have been in the room many times where I've been told on the phone, well, you wouldn't know, you're too young, or you don't understand, you're not a business owner. And in many cases said it without saying it, that either I'm Asian, I'm a female, who knows, right? But how can your coaches approach situations like that when maybe franchisees don't want to hear it, or maybe they're not open to necessarily this learning from someone that might not look like them? You know, how would you coach your team on ensuring that, you know, you're getting through to everyone? And I think the easy answer would be like, oh, well, that franchisee I would never approve them. There's always going to be those ones in your system. You can't avoid it. There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and franchising is emotional. So it gets to a point sometimes where the tough conversations need to be had. And to Tony's point, getting out of your comfort zone. So what is your suggestion in terms of, you know, whether it's coaching your coaches or coaching your fran dev, Marianne, on having those tough conversations to ensure that there is a balance of power and equity in your organization?
Yes, that there's so much in that question, but thank you for asking. Yeah, I think one of the things that I found probably one of the most successful opportunities I think that there is in franchising, whether you're an emerging brand or an established brand, is the closer that you can keep franchisees together and holding accountability to each other, as opposed to like brand compliance or any of those like the stick in the carrot kind of thing. When franchisees hold each other accountable to marketing efforts, market share, you know, any of those types of things, when there's that type of accountability, there's also that type of help. And I often say that, you know, you want to see somebody get brand compliant in a local store, have them invite 20 other franchisees over. Fresh paint never went out so fast, right? So I think as a business coach, to the extent that, and so, you know, some people are newer to the industry, they're younger or older, you're too old, you don't know what's going on. To the extent that you can match up small groups of franchises for specific sprints or specific challenges, right? Have a very defined purpose, beginning, end, outcome, etc. Put them together and then be more of a facilitator of what is happening and what's going on, whether somebody's trying to garner better market share, whether somebody's trying to garner more diverse market share. Putting franchisees together for the creative thinking and accountability. It's like, okay, you said you were going to go do this, but you didn't do it. So why are you still whining? And that's coming from them. That kind of peer pressure kind of folds in. And it kind of takes the pressure off, because then on a side back, business coach can step in and say, okay, your little group there kind of beat you up. I feel bad. How can I help? Right. So now you can come in the back end and help get them to move so they are moving in the direction they want to move in.
I love that. That's great advice. And Diane, I want you to kind of piggyback off that, because if anyone, you're one of the biggest champions of having a correct culture. I'm under the guise of, yes, there is a such thing as good culture, but I also think that it's a scale, and it's more about having the correct fit. So, how does that play into, when there's tough conversations, building a franchise from the ground up, and also might be running into difficulties ensuring there's equity, there's diversity, and making sure that that culture remains inclusive from the top down?
Good question. And Maddie, early on in my corporate career, I worked for companies like Marriott and Hilton, big companies. They didn't get that way by just waking up every day and figuring it out. They were very intentional, and culture is an area where both were intentional. And I can remember when culture began to first used to be discussed, because I've been in business a long time, and they were talking about setting culture. And I was really having a hard time finding a way to make that tangible to me, because I'd always seen the words, right? They're hanging on a wall at the home office, right? They're on letterhead, they're in emails, they're on social. And this really wise person said, Diane, all culture is, I'll never forget this. It's who we are and what we stand for. He said, start there to determine your culture. Well, that's one of those things that is simple, but it's not easy, because who are we and what do we stand for? Because if we say we stand for diversity and inclusion, and we want to work with people like us, and we look around and everybody looks just like us, I don't think we stand for that. I don't think we do. And so we have to start somewhere thus. So I would say when it comes to setting the culture, is make up your mind. We are not going to be doing things the same way that it's always been done just because it's the way it's always been done. We're going to do this and be intentional, because I will tell you, if we continue to do things the way they've always been done, especially in the area of culture and when it comes to reaching diverse audiences, we will be in a room by ourselves one day and won't know how we got there. We will look around and go, where did everybody go? It changed. You did it. Life changed. If y'all looked around lately outside of franchising, it doesn't look like we look in those big meeting rooms, does it? Don't look anything like it. It's the only place I go where it looks like that right now. And I'm not saying that to bash on franchising. I love franchising. I'm saying we have work to do. So who are we and what do we stand for? And do we want to reach people that are different than us? And I like what Tony said in having the hard conversations. If those hard conversations are hard for you, that's okay. Then start having them anyway. And let's figure out who we are, what we stand for, and what we're going to mean and believe and do, and set that way. And if we're not hitting the mark there, we need to course correct and figure it out. Because what no one has any time for is someone telling they're one thing and they're another. Because Maddie, you and I have walked that road, and ain't nobody got time for that. And so that is an area where that is an area where in this next gen coming on, they can smell a lack of authenticity 100 miles away. Mm-hmm. So this is an area all of us need to do our reflection on and be certain that what we're doing matches who we are and what we stand for.
And I think it's good to be reminded, last night, my husband, who's notorious for picking just terrible movies I don't want to watch, put on Moneyball. And I was like, I'll watch it. And it resonated very well, because I'm right now in some hot water at PSB in terms of metrics, and we're trying to figure it out and make it work. But I also think that franchising, as quick as we can turn things around and as many levers as they can pull, it's always a process. And it's the same thing no matter what. And I often say that franchising lives in the gray area, because we are not all corporate where one lever changes everything, and we're not all, small businesses. We're very much in the middle, and it's very much intertwined with emotion. So as you're dealing with people, whether it's bringing on Fran Dev and their life savings, hiring people, coaching to diversity, these things take time. Nobody likes change, and especially a system that has been around around for a long time. So, you know, it's definitely a good thing to remember that these things do take time. And I think that there's a lot of franchises out there that might say, oh, that's not me, or I don't need to do it, or, you know, the big guys aren't doing it. I had a podcast within, I think it was like 6 months ago, with the chief franchising officer at McDonald's, literally the most famous I'll ever be. I was like peeing my pants. I was like so nervous. And they just recently, and I'm sure you've seen it on LinkedIn, but are allowing for the first time in decades new franchisees to come into their system. Oftentimes they just grow with who they have, or they have big buying groups. They want to increase the diversity. They want to provide more franchising opportunities for people like us, not just these large buying groups or people that have been legacies in the system. And to that, I say, if McDonald's is going to do it, why can't you? Right? There's a reason they're doing it. And at the end of the day, there's clearly money to be made, because I understand that it's business, but it's business intertwined with the most people imaginable. And I think that's tough. And on that, Ashley, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask, you know, what is one of the hardest situations you've been in being a female, whether it's in business or in franchising?
Yeah. I mean, there's been quite a few, but honestly, it is, you know, so it's when you have to speak up, and to exactly what Tony and Diane were saying about like those hard conversations and being uncomfortable. It's those moments of where I've been at an executive table of it was the boys club. Mm-hmm. They would not tell you, they would not admit that it was the boys club. Even when I called it out, it was, oh, that's not the case. And I'm like, then why are the 4 of you going golfing? There's 4 of you and 1 of me, and the 4 of you are doing this weird. I don't golf, but that doesn't mean that when the rest of the executive team is doing a non-work function going golfing, but I find out about it after the fact, that means it's a boys club. Like that's intentional. And so calling those things out, it's very uncomfortable, because you don't want to say that to your CEO or to the rest of your executive team, that this is what you guys are doing. And you don't even realize you're doing it. They weren't doing it to be mean spirited, anything like that. They were doing it because that's the world that they live in. And they didn't realize that that was even happening. Maybe subconsciously, some did, some didn't. I mean, obviously it got back to me. So one of them thought that it was the thing that I should know, which is positive on that side. But it is being able to speak up in that situation where that's hard to do. But that's the only way that we're going to make change, is you have to be comfortable getting uncomfortable. It's never going to get easier, but you have to just do it, or it's going to stay like that forever.
I love that. And Diane, what about you?
Well, I love where this conversation is headed. And the thing about men and women working in the workplace, I've been in the workplace a long time. Early on, I'll never forget, it's just not franchising, but many years ago, I had a sick kid, because Maddie, to your point, you're the one who's getting the call, right? And I was actually a single mom at the time. And I'll never forget my boss looking at me and goes, man, you need to get a wife for that kind of thing. And that is, you know, it was just a male-centric environment. And I will tell you, an area that I personally have struggled in, this is kind of sharing a little, probably an overshare, but I think everybody here can handle it. But I'm pretty emotional about things. And franchising, as Marianne stated, is an emotional thing. And because you're talking about people's lives and livelihood and their families. And I can get emotional. And if there's an area where I think we need to grow in business in general and in franchising as a whole, is in the area of handling that it can get emotional sometimes. And that doesn't mean it's a female issue here, you know, that, you know, because I can get them. If I told someone the other day, I have two ways I go emotionally. I'm either like this or I'm like this, you know, over franchising, because I feel the pain of these franchisees. Is knowing how to process that emotions can also have a place at the table without everybody getting worked up about it. Because I get that way because I freaking care. That's it. I'm not doing this because it's fun. I wish I wouldn't be doing this. Right, Ashley? Amen? You wish you were doing this.
100%.
I don't want to be doing that. But I care. And you know what? It seems like we still don't really know what to do if someone's getting a little teary, a little break in their throat. It gets everybody's like, you know, everybody seems kind of get shook up about it. why can't I? And I don't know. I've questioned this. Is this because it was such a male-dominated world for so long? There was never a place for emotions at the table, because that's just not. We're equal, but we're different. This is a difference. And I wonder about that. We just never felt like it was okay. But I have times I get emotional. I quit apologizing for it because I care. And I'm going to leave it at that.
I love that. And coming from someone who's the complete opposite, I can appreciate that, because oftentimes I'm the one that's like callous and cold-hearted, when really I'm like, I care. I just was born without tear ducts. I don't know what to tell you.
Well, we need a balance of both. You know what I mean? If everybody was around the table crying, it'd be a bad deal. But if people get emotional over business, and I get emotional because I care, and I look at the franchisees and I see the fear in their eyes, and my heart hurts for them, and I just want us to be able to respond to that kind of thing. And Maddie, if yours comes across that you come across like you're not having the most emotions, that needs to be. I'll save that for another one. But that needs to be okay too. We need to be able to accept that deep people have a different response, and that all responses are valid and they're okay.
And I think that this also will go down, and Tony, don't worry, I'm coming to you too. But I think that this also goes down to how important it is that we know our people, and that we're putting the right people in the right seats, and the franchisees in the right areas and in the right brands as well. So whether you're, a consultant, a brand, a supplier, not every business is the right business for you. I know that typically it's dollar signs, but that can quickly go the other way if you have the wrong people in the wrong seats. And so a quick piece of advice is, we started implementing the DISC profiles, or the personality assessments. And that is a great way to figure out who's going to fit into your system, who's going to be successful in your system. Because you can, on the Fran Dev side, you can compare them to your top performers or not. It doesn't care if you're a female, if you got 5 legs, 12 arms, they're going to judge based on how you think and how you act. And you can also do that for your, your internal culture. Are they going to fit? Are you looking for someone that's a doer, a visionary? So while for me, it always seemed very fluffy and cliche, and like, I'm as type A as they come, like, I got things to do, don't make me take this personality assessment. That thing was spot on. So we found a lot of success about that, because there's a lot of human error, and there's a lot of space for growth, especially when it comes to everyone working remote, and maybe not all discovery days are in person and XYZ, but that is a good way to help make that is so subjective, objective in the workplace. And so Tony, tell me about one of the toughest times you've had in business and how you've overcome it.
So I want to add to the comments about being women in business, period. Imagine being a Black woman, the only Black in the room and the only woman in the room. It is intimidating. But for me,
it wasn't a competition, but now it is, Tony.
Say that again, Maddie. My light went out.
I said it wasn't a competition, and now it is. Oh, we're in overtime. Okay, let Tony go, and then we'll.
So I just wanted to say, in business, what I've been fortunate, and I want everybody to hear this, I've been extremely fortunate to have a lot of white male allies who gave me an opportunity because they like me. So how you show up is so important, because my franchisor, I didn't have the investment when I met him. He gave me a break. And today I've referred him 9 franchisees. So finding the people who can be your allies when you are the only one in the room is important as well. And I am personally in business, I'm drastic. So I see obstacles, but I'm like, huh. And I just walk around them, walk over them, get somebody else's hand and say, guide me through them. And it's just helped me tremendously in my journey.
Well, thank you for sharing. And I think that brings us together as a whole of, it doesn't matter if you're male, female, red, white, black. At the end of the day, franchising is about people. It's about the right people. It's about being a good person. And that doesn't mean that you can't have hard conversations. It doesn't mean that things are never going to go wrong or people aren't going to be wrong. But it's going to be about how you treat them, how you work through it with them. Franchising is like a marriage. Most of the times it's 10 years. So, I have yet to meet someone that said marriage is easy. So be prepared for the right conversation, the hard conversations, the tough spots. And if it's the right person, it'll always work out. Thanks again, Promo Republic, for having us. And definitely you guys can connect with us on LinkedIn via these QR codes.
Thank you so much. I hope that everybody in the audience is as powered up as I am by this, and that we stayed true to our webinar title, Franchise Power Up. This was an amazing last panel. Thank you, ladies, so much. I have tons and tons of notes, and from the bottom of my heart, just thank you. I think that we talked a lot about a lot of topics that are uncomfortable, and I absolutely love that, right? The only way that we're going to make change is if we do something different. So with that said, that was the last session for the day. Thank you everybody for coming out, and thank you to Promo Republic for sponsoring the CMO Peer Talks community. Without them, it wouldn't be possible. Here is my QR code and some of the other QR codes from the other speakers. If anybody wants to connect with anybody, please do. I'll probably reach out to everybody over time just to say thank you and put a little personal touch on it. But I really do appreciate every single one of you coming out. Some of you guys came out to the call for my first host. I hope that I wasn't too annoying or ridiculous. So with that said, please, if you're going out to FCXC, you will be able to meet me, Daria, I think Max, and a bunch of other people from CMO Peer Talks community. We're hosting a live events at FCXC. I will send you the invite. Just DM me and you are invited, especially if you showed up here. So I look forward to that and seeing you guys all in IRL or in real life, if you don't know what that means. And here's the link for it if you want to go ahead and put it into your phone now. So I'm not sure how many more slides there are, but we're going to keep going. So I think this is the last one here. So you guys are just free to go ahead and log off at any point. See you guys later. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate all of you guys. And I'm going to stop sharing here. Steve, nice to see you. It's always a pleasure. Tim, you had amazing questions. Malina, thanks. Tony, you were awesome.
Great job, Matthew.
Yes, thanks, Tony. You're the best.
I'm so proud of you.
Thanks.
I want to know more about CMO Talks, though.
Steven, thanks for coming out, brother. Really appreciate you. Amanda.
Yeah, man, got support. Great job, Matt.
Of course, appreciate it, brother. Thank you guys so much. Everybody's logging off. We got like 4 people left, so I'll be the last one to get off of here. So see you later, Steve. You're like my day one mentor. You know that. Love you so much, brother. I gotta connect you with Jessica for real. She's super excited about talking with you. You know, fast casuals gotta stick together. So you're muted if you're saying anything, but go ahead and log off, brother. Let's grab